Joseph Warren stands before the towering doors of the Klingon flagship, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and determination. He knows that beyond these doors lies a challenge unlike any human has faced before, to serve as first mate to the Klingon queen herself. The fate of Earth's alliance with the Klingon Empire rests on his shoulders, and more specifically, on his legendary stamina. The massive doors slide open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a cavernous hangar bay filled with snarling Klingon warriors. At the far end, seated upon a raised dais, is Queen Vesta. Her piercing gaze locks onto Joseph as he strides forward, his steps echoing in the sudden silence. "So, this is the human specimen," Vesta's voice booms across the hangar. "I expected more." Joseph keeps his expression neutral, years of diplomatic training kicking in. "Your Majesty, I am honored to be chosen for this position. I assure you, appearances can be deceiving." A ripple of laughter courses through the assembled Klingons. Vesta silences them with a raised hand. "We shall see, Terran. Your reputation for endurance has reached even our ears, but reputation and reality are often far removed." She descends from her throne, circling Joseph like a predator sizing up its prey. "You will face a series of trials, each designed to push you beyond your limits. Should you fail, you will be ejected into space. Should you succeed—" Her eyes glint with something Joseph can't quite decipher. "Well, we shall see about that as well." The first trial begins immediately. Joseph is led to a combat arena where he faces a gauntlet of Klingon warriors. Hours pass as he grapples, dodges, and counters attack after attack. The Klingons watch in growing amazement as the human shows no signs of fatigue. Trial after trial follows. Joseph runs a punishing obstacle course that would leave most beings gasping for breath. He withstands extreme temperature fluctuations that would incapacitate lesser species. Through it all, he perseveres, his stamina seeming to know no bounds. As the final trial approaches, even Queen Vesta's skepticism has begun to waver. "The dusk to dawn ritual," she announces. "No rest, constant physical activity. Many Klingons have failed this test. Let us see how a human fares." The ritual begins as the ship's artificial night cycle commences. Joseph engages in continuous physical tasks: lifting, running, fighting simulations. Hours tick by, and still he pushes on. The Klingon crew watches in disbelief as the night wears on, and the human shows no signs of slowing. As the ship's systems simulate dawn, Joseph completes his final task. He stands tall, breathing heavily, but still very much alert and functional. The hangar bay erupts in a cacophony of impressed roars and pounding fists. Queen Vesta approaches, her expression a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "It seems the rumors of human stamina were understated," she says, her voice low enough for only Joseph to hear. "You have proven yourself worthy of the position, Terran, but I find myself curious about the full extent of your endurance." She turns to address the crew. "The human has passed all trials. He shall serve as first mate." Then to Joseph, "Report to my private quarters immediately. We have much to discuss regarding your duties." As Joseph follows Queen Vesta out of the hangar, he realizes that his greatest test of stamina may be yet to come. The future of human-Klingon relations hangs in the balance, and it's up to him to go all night if necessary. Joseph followed Queen Vesta through winding corridors, his muscles still humming from the intense trials. The massive doors to her private quarters slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber adorned with battle trophies and luxurious furs. Vesta dismissed her guards with a curt nod, leaving them alone in the opulent space. "Your performance was impressive, Terran," Vesta said, circling Joseph slowly. "But I find myself curious about the full extent of your abilities." Joseph stood tall, meeting her gaze. "I'm prepared for any challenge, Your Majesty." Vesta's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Good, because I have one final test for you." She shed her ornate cloak, revealing her muscular form. "Klingon males have always fallen short in satisfying my needs. They lack the stamina to keep up with my desires, but you—" Her eyes raked over him appraisingly. You may be different. Understanding dawned on Joseph. This wasn't just about physical endurance anymore. The stakes had risen exponentially. Vesta continued, her voice low and intense. Please me throughout the night, and I will support an alliance between Earth and the Klingon Empire. Fail and all our negotiations are forfeit. Joseph swallowed hard, the weight of interstellar diplomacy settling on his shoulders. I accept your challenge, Your Majesty. What followed was a night of passion unlike any Joseph had experienced before. Vesta was a force of nature, demanding and relentless. But Joseph matched her intensity, drawing on reserves of stamina he didn't know he possessed. He introduced her to human techniques unknown in Klingon culture. Vesta gasped in surprise as Joseph focused on her pleasure, a concept foreign to the typically self-centered Klingon males. Hours passed in a blur of tangled limbs and heated breaths. As artificial dawn broke, they lay spent but satisfied. Vesta propped herself up on an elbow, studying Joseph with newfound respect. You have exceeded all expectations, Terran. I've never experienced such thoroughness. Joseph allowed himself a small smile. I'm glad I could prove the worth of humanity, Your Majesty. Vesta nodded, her expression thoughtful. Indeed, you've given me much to consider regarding this alliance. As Joseph prepared to leave, the ship's gossip channels had already done their work. The corridors buzzed with whispers and pointed looks. He had barely made it halfway to his quarters when a group of high-ranking Klingon officers blocked his path. At their head stood Commander Koth, a mountain of a Klingon with a face etched in scars. His eyes blazed with fury. Human, he spat. You dishonor our people with your actions. You think to curry favor with our queen through base physical acts? Joseph straightened, facing the hulking Klingon. I completed the task set before me, Commander. Nothing more, nothing less. Koth's face contorted with rage. You mock our traditions. I challenge you to combat, here and now. We shall see if your stamina extends to the battlefield. The gathered Klingons murmured in anticipation. Joseph knew he couldn't back down, despite his exhaustion. The future of human-Klingon relations hung in the balance. I accept your challenge, Commander, Joseph said, his voice steady. When and where? The main arena. 2 hours from now, Kuth growled. Prepare yourself, human. Your luck ends today. As the Klingons dispersed, Joseph leaned against a bulkhead, his body crying out for rest. He had mere hours to recover before facing a fresh, enraged Klingon warrior in combat. The ship hummed with tension as news of the impending duel spread. In her chambers, Queen Vesta received reports of the confrontation. She paced, torn between her newfound appreciation for Joseph and her duty to Klingon traditions. The human's presence was already causing ripples she hadn't anticipated. Whatever the outcome of this duel, she realized, nothing aboard her ship would ever be the same. Joseph made his way to the quarters assigned to him, his mind racing. He had to find a way to overcome his fatigue and face Koth. As he entered the sparse room, he began to prepare himself mentally and physically for the battle ahead. The fate of two worlds rested on his ability to triumph once more. Joseph's muscles screamed in protest as he entered his quarters, the adrenaline from his night with Queen Vesta finally fading. He had barely begun to contemplate rest when a sharp knock at his door shattered any hope of respite. Enter, he called, straightening his posture despite his exhaustion. A young Klingon officer stepped inside, his face a mask of barely concealed disdain. Human, your presence is required in the main arena. Commander Koth has challenged you to combat. Joseph's heart sank, but he kept his expression neutral. When? 2 hours, the officer spat. Do not be late, or you will forfeit more than just the match. As the door slid shut, Joseph slumped against the wall. He needed an edge, something to overcome the bone-deep weariness threatening to overwhelm him. A thought struck him. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Talara, the Vulcan exchange officer he'd heard whispers about. Mustering his remaining strength, Joseph made his way to the medical bay. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the rest of the Klingon vessel. Dr. Talara, a tall Vulcan woman with piercing eyes, regarded him with a raised eyebrow. Fascinating, she said, running a scanner over his body. Your physiology shows signs of extreme exertion, yet you remain functional. What brings you here, Mr. Warren? Joseph explained his situation, watching as understanding dawned in the Vulcan's eyes. I see, she said. While I cannot directly interfere in Klingon affairs, I believe I can offer assistance within ethical boundaries. Her fingers flew over a nearby console. Human adrenal glands produce a unique compound that enhances stamina and recovery. I can synthesize a safe temporary stimulant based on this compound. Minutes later, Joseph held a small vial of clear liquid. He downed it in one swift motion, grimacing at the bitter taste. Almost immediately, he felt a surge of energy coursing through his veins. The effects will last approximately 4 hours, Dr. Tillara cautioned. Use this time wisely, Mr. Warren. Joseph nodded his thanks and headed for the arena. As he walked, he noticed the stimulant sharpening his senses. The constant hum of the ship's engines became more distinct, and he could pick out individual conversations from passing Klingons. The main arena was a cacophony of sound and motion. Hundreds of Klingons packed the towering metal stands, their excited chatter echoing off the walls. Joseph's eyes swept the circular space, taking in the various obstacles scattered throughout. Low walls, pillars, and even a few weapon racks. Queen Vesta's voice cut through the din, amplified by hidden speakers. This duel will serve as more than a test of individual prowess, she declared. It will determine humanity's worthiness as potential allies to the Klingon Empire. Should the human emerge victorious, formal alliance talks will begin immediately. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Joseph realized the stakes had just been raised exponentially. He approached the weapons rack, aware of hundreds of eyes tracking his every move. To his right, Commander Koth hefted a wicked-looking bat'leth, its curved blade gleaming under the harsh arena lights. Joseph's hand hovered over the array of Klingon weapons before settling on a simple metal staff. He heard snickers from the crowd, but ignored them. The familiar weight in his hands brought back memories of his martial arts training on Earth. Begin! Queen Vesta's command rang out. Koth wasted no time, charging forward with a guttural roar. His bat'leth sliced through the air, aiming for Joseph's midsection. Thanks to the stimulant coursing through his system, Joseph's reflexes were razor-sharp. He sidestepped the attack, bringing his staff up to deflect the follow-up strike. The clash of metal on metal rang out as Joseph parried blow after blow. He stayed on the defensive, letting Koth wear himself out while looking for openings. The Klingons' attacks were powerful but predictable, fueled more by rage than strategy. Joseph ducked under a wild swing, using his staff to vault over a low wall. He landed nimbly on the other side, immediately spinning to face his opponent. Koth's face contorted with fury as he smashed through the obstacle, closing the distance once more. As the battle wore on, Joseph's stamina became increasingly apparent. While Koth's movements grew sluggish, Joseph maintained a steady rhythm of evasion and counterattacks. He employed techniques unfamiliar to the Klingons, using his staff to redirect Koth's momentum and off-balance the larger warrior. The crowd's jeers had transformed into murmurs of grudging respect. Even Queen Vesta leaned forward on her elevated platform, her eyes narrowed in concentration as she studied Joseph's movements. Frustration radiated from Koth in waves. With a snarl, he scooped up a handful of sand from the arena floor and flung it at Joseph's face. The human's enhanced reflexes allowed him to close his eyes just in time, but the momentary blindness left him vulnerable. Joseph relied on his other senses, listening for Koth's labored breathing and heavy footsteps. He ducked and rolled, feeling the whisper of the bat'leth passing inches from his head. As he came up in a crouch, he blinked rapidly to clear his vision. Koth pressed his advantage, raining down blows with renewed vigor. But Joseph's earlier restraint had paid off. While the Klingon was nearing exhaustion, the human still had reserves of energy to draw upon. In a fluid motion, Joseph swept Koth's legs out from under him. As the Klingon stumbled, Joseph executed a complex series of strikes, first disarming his opponent, then using the staff to pin Koth to the ground. The tip of the metal rod pressed against the Klingon's throat, and for a moment, the arena fell silent. "Yield," Joseph said, his voice carrying in the stillness. Koth's eyes blazed with hatred, but he gave a barely perceptible nod. Joseph stepped back, lowering his weapon. The crowd erupted into a mix of cheers and angry shouts. Queen Vesta rose to her feet. "The human is victorious," she announced. "As promised, we shall begin discussions for an alliance between the Klingon Empire and Earth." As Joseph turned to leave the arena, he caught sight of a group of Klingons huddled in intense conversation. At their center stood Lieutenant Mcka, Koth's second-in-command. The looks they cast in Joseph's direction were far from friendly. The stimulant's effects began to fade as Joseph made his way back to his quarters. Exhaustion crept back into his bones, reminding him that this victory, hard-fought as it was, marked only the beginning of his challenges aboard the Klingon ship. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching his every move, waiting for any sign of weakness. As he rounded a corner, Joseph nearly collided with a group of Klingon officers engaged in hushed conversation. They fell silent at his approach, their eyes following him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Joseph nodded politely and continued on his way, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten as he processed the strange encounter. The atmosphere aboard the ship had shifted palpably since his duel with Commander Koth, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was at the center of a brewing storm. His suspicions were confirmed the next morning when he received a summons from Queen Vesta herself. As he entered her private chambers, Joseph was struck by the sight of the Klingon monarch poring over a series of data pads, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Ah, Joseph," she said, looking up as he approached. "I trust you've recovered from yesterday's exertions?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Joseph replied, standing at attention. "I'm ready for whatever tasks you require of me." Vesta's lips curved into a small smile. "Excellent, because I have a new assignment for you, one that may prove even more challenging than facing Commander Koth in combat." She gestured for Joseph to join her at the large tactical display dominating the center of the room. "You will be accompanying me to a series of high-level meetings and strategic planning sessions. I want your perspective on our discussions, particularly as they relate to potential alliance opportunities with Earth." Joseph's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I'm honored, Your Majesty, but are you sure that's wise? Won't your advisors object to an outsider's presence?" "Let me worry about my advisors," Vesta said, her voice taking on a steely edge. "You've proven your worth both in private and in public. It's time to put that human ingenuity of yours to work on a larger scale." Over the next few days, Joseph found himself thrust into the heart of Klingon politics. He sat in on meetings where battle plans were debated, listened to heated arguments about resource allocation, and offered insights on human diplomatic practices. Throughout it all, he could feel the resentful glares of certain Klingon officers burning into his back. One evening, as Joseph made his way back to his quarters after a particularly grueling session, he was cornered by a group of Klingon warriors led by Lieutenant Mcka. The lieutenant's eyes glittered with scarcely controlled hostility. "Enjoying your new position, human?" Mcka sneered. "Don't get too comfortable. Some of us haven't forgotten what you really are. An interloper, currying favor through dishonorable means." Joseph stood his ground, meeting Mcka's gaze steadily. "I've done nothing dishonorable, Lieutenant. I've merely answered the challenges put before me to the best of my ability." Mcka leaned in close, his breath hot on Joseph's face. "Then perhaps it's time for some new challenges, ones that will truly test the limits of your stamina." Before Joseph could respond, the group of Klingons dispersed, leaving him alone in the corridor with a growing sense of unease. He knew that Mcka's words were more than just an idle threat. They were a promise of trials to come. The next morning, Joseph received an unexpected visitor in his quarters. Dr. Tilara, the Vulcan medical officer who had assisted him before his duel with Koth. Her face was as impassive as ever, but Joseph sensed an undercurrent of excitement in her voice. "Mr. Warren, I have a proposition for you," she said without preamble. "My research into human physiology has revealed some fascinating possibilities. I believe there may be applications that could benefit Klingon warriors, particularly in the realm of stamina enhancement." Joseph listened intently as Tilara outlined her ideas for a series of experiments using synthesized human hormones. The potential implications were staggering, If successful, it could revolutionize Klingon combat capabilities and solidify the growing alliance between their peoples. I'll do it, Joseph said, recognizing the diplomatic value of such research. What do you need from me? As they began to discuss the details of the experiments, Joseph's mind raced with the possibilities and the potential risks. He knew that his participation in Talara's research would only further complicate his already precarious position aboard the ship. Later that day, Joseph found himself once again in Queen Vesta's private chambers. This time, however, the atmosphere was decidedly different. The tactical displays were dark, and the Queen herself seemed more relaxed, almost vulnerable. "Joseph," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it, "I find myself curious about human customs, particularly in matters of intimacy. I wonder if you might be willing to demonstrate some of your techniques." The request caught Joseph off guard, but he quickly regained his composure. "Of course, Your Majesty. I'd be happy to share what I know about human practices." What followed was a series of increasingly intimate, cultural exchange sessions, during which Joseph introduced Vesta to a wide range of human techniques and approaches to physical intimacy. The Queen proved to be an eager and quick learner, and with each encounter, the bond between them deepened. As days turned into weeks, Joseph found himself walking a precarious tightrope. By day, he navigated the treacherous waters of Klingon politics, offering insights in strategy meetings and participating in Talara's groundbreaking research. By night, he explored the boundaries of human-Klingon intimacy with Queen Vesta, their private sessions growing more intense and meaningful with each passing day. But Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that his enemies were closing in. Whispered conversations ceased when he entered rooms, and he often caught glimpses of Lieutenant Mcka, huddled with groups of disgruntled-looking Klingon warriors. The atmosphere aboard the ship grew increasingly tense, like a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in the form of a formal challenge, delivered to Joseph by a stern-faced Klingon officer. Lieutenant Mcka, seizing on the growing unrest among the crew, had orchestrated a series of endurance tests designed to push Joseph to his absolute limits and beyond. As Joseph read through the list of grueling trials that awaited him, he knew that this was more than just a test of his physical capabilities. It was a battle for the future of human-Klingon relations, and possibly for the balance of power within the Klingon Empire itself. With the weight of two worlds on his shoulders, Joseph began to prepare for the challenges ahead. He sought out Dr. Talara, hoping to leverage her research to give him every possible advantage, as they worked together to develop a training regimen that would maximize his endurance and recovery time. Joseph couldn't help but wonder if it would be enough. The day before the trials were set to begin, Joseph received an unexpected visitor. Queen Vesta herself stood in his doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and tenacity. "Joseph," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The trials begin at dawn. Are you prepared?" He nodded, straightening his posture. "As ready as I'll ever be, Your Majesty." Vesta's eyes softened for a moment. "What lies ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But remember, you carry the hopes of two worlds with you." With a final lingering look, she departed, leaving Joseph to contemplate the challenges that awaited him. As the first rays of the Klingon sun pierced the viewport, Joseph found himself standing before a gathered crowd in the ship's holographic training chamber. Lieutenant Mcka's voice boomed through the space, outlining the first trial. "For 24 hours, you will endure the harshest conditions Kronos has to offer," Mcka announced, his eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. "Survive, and you may proceed to the next challenge." The air shimmered as the holographic environment took shape around Joseph. Jagged cliffs rose on all sides, while the ground beneath his feet transformed into treacherous, shifting scree. A biting wind howled through the simulated landscape, carrying with it the acrid scent of sulfur. Joseph took a deep breath, feeling the effects of Dr. Talara's treatments coursing through his body. He began to move, each step carefully placed as he navigated the perilous terrain. Hours passed as he scaled sheer rock faces, crossed fields of razor-sharp volcanic glass, and waded through streams of corrosive liquid. The Klingon observers watched with growing interest as Joseph displayed a level of endurance that defied their expectations. Even as the simulated environment cycled through extreme temperature fluctuations, from searing heat to bone-chilling cold, the human pressed on. As the trial neared its conclusion, Joseph's enhanced stamina became impossible to ignore. Whispers spread through the crowd of Klingons, some grudgingly impressed, others suspicious of this unexpected display of fortitude. Mcka's face darkened as he watched Joseph complete the final leg of the challenge, emerging from a simulated acid rainstorm with his drive unbroken. As the 24-hour mark arrived, the lieutenant's voice cut through the chamber once more. "The human has survived the first trial," he growled, unable to entirely mask his frustration. "But do not celebrate yet. The true test of a warrior lies not in his body, but in his mind." With a gesture, Mcka signaled to a group of Klingon technicians. They wheeled forward a device that sent a chill down Joseph's spine, the infamous Klingon mind sifter. "Your next challenge," Mcka announced, his voice dripping with malice, "will be to withstand the most grueling interrogation our empire has to offer." Joseph's heart raced as he was strapped into the chair, electrodes attached to his temples. He caught sight of Dr. Talara among the observers, her face impassive save for a subtle nod in his direction. He felt a small surge of relief, knowing the neural inhibitor she had provided was in place. As the mind sifter hummed to life, Joseph steeled himself for the onslaught. The machine probed his thoughts, seeking to extract information about Earth's defenses. Joseph focused on the techniques Talara had taught him, compartmentalizing his mind and presenting carefully selected memories to the device. Hours passed as the interrogation continued. Joseph's face contorted with effort, sweat beading on his brow as he fought to maintain control. The Klingon observers leaned forward, captivated by the human's unexpected resilience. Ambassador Corral watched intently, recognizing the potential impact this display could have on the undecided factions within the Empire. Joseph's ability to withstand the mind sifter was quickly becoming a powerful argument in favor of the human-Klingon alliance. As the interrogation reached its peak intensity, Joseph managed to strike a delicate balance. He revealed enough non-sensitive information to satisfy the Klingon interrogators, while keeping Earth's most crucial secrets locked away. When the mind sifter was finally deactivated, a murmur of reluctant admiration rippled through the crowd. Mcka's face was a storm of conflicting emotions as he stepped forward to address the assembly. Before he could speak, however, a junior officer burst into the chamber, his expression grave. "Lieutenant," the officer gasped, "we've received an urgent transmission. Queen Vesta's shuttle has gone missing. It crashed on an uncharted moon during her ritual hunt." The room erupted into chaos as the news spread. Joseph, still reeling from the effects of the mind sifter, pushed himself to his feet. "I volunteer to lead a rescue mission," he declared, his voice hoarse but determined. Mcka's eyes narrowed, caught between his desire to continue the trials and the pressing need to recover their missing monarch. After a moment of tense deliberation, he gave a curt nod. "The remaining challenges will be postponed. Assemble your team, human. You have 1 hour to prepare for departure." As Joseph moved to leave the chamber, he found his path blocked by Ambassador Corral. The older Klingon studied him intently before speaking in a low voice. "You've proven yourself more capable than many believed possible," Joseph warned. "But be warned. This rescue mission may be your greatest test yet. Not all who wish you to fail will be left behind on this ship." With those cryptic words hanging in the air, Corral stepped aside. Joseph hurried to gather his team, acutely aware that the fate of 2 worlds might hinge on the success of this mission. As he boarded the rescue vessel with Dr. Talara and a select group of Klingon warriors at his side, Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something far more complex and dangerous than a simple search and rescue operation. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them towards the uncharted moon where Queen Vesta awaited. As they broke through the Klingon flagship's protective shields and entered open space, Joseph allowed himself a moment to marvel at the vast, star-studded expanse before them. He knew that somewhere in that cosmic wilderness, a queen fought for survival, and with her, the future of human-Klingon relations hung in the balance. Balance. As the rescue vessel plunged through the atmosphere of the uncharted moon, Joseph gripped the control panel, his eyes scanning the rapidly approaching surface. The ship bucked and shuddered, fighting against fierce winds and electromagnetic disturbances that threatened to tear it apart. "Shields at 60%, shouted Dr. Talara, her fingers flying over a console. "We're losing stability." Joseph's eyebrows furrowed as he wrestled with the controls. "Reroute power from non-essential systems. We're going in hot." The Klingon warriors on board braced themselves as the ship careened towards a vast rocky plain. At the last moment, Joseph pulled up, the vessel's belly scraping against jagged stone before settling into a rough landing. As the dust cleared, Joseph activated the ship's advanced scanning technology. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a topographical map of the surrounding area. A faint pulsing dot caught his attention. "There," he said, pointing. "That's got to be Vesta's life sign." The team disembarked, immediately assaulted by the moon's harsh conditions. Howling winds whipped stinging particles of dust and ice against their faces. Joseph squinted through the maelstrom, gesturing towards a towering cliff face in the distance. "The signal's coming from beyond those rocks. Let's move." They set off across the treacherous terrain, each step a battle against the unforgiving landscape. Deep chasms yawned beneath their feet, forcing them to leap across or find precarious paths around. Unstable rock formations loomed overhead, occasionally showering them with debris. After hours of grueling progress, they finally reached the coordinates of the crash site. The twisted wreckage of Queen Vesta's shuttle lay scattered across a small plateau, but there was no sign of the Klingon monarch. Joseph circled the debris, his trained eyes picking out details. "Look here," he called out, indicating a set of faint impressions in the rocky soil. "These tracks lead away from the crash. She survived." Following the trail, the team found themselves at the edge of a dense alien forest. Bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow over the landscape, pulsing with otherworldly life. As they ventured deeper into the strange woodland, the air grew thick with unfamiliar scents and sounds. Suddenly, a rustling in the undergrowth put them on high alert. Joseph raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. From the shadows emerged a group of bizarre creatures, unlike anything he had ever seen. They moved with a fluid grace, their bodies a mesmerizing blend of primate and cephalopod features. The aliens chittered and clicked, tentacles writhing as they advanced on the rescue team. Joseph's mind raced, recalling his diplomatic training. He held up his empty hands, palms outward, and took a slow step forward. "We mean you no harm," he said softly, accompanying his words with gentle gestures. He pointed to himself, then to his team, and made a sweeping motion to indicate their search. Finally, he held up an image of Queen Vesta on his datapad. The creatures paused, their large, intelligent eyes studying Joseph intently. After a tense moment, one of them reached out a tentacle and touched the image of Vesta. It made a series of melodic clicks, then turned and gestured for the team to follow. As they trekked through the luminous forest, Joseph's curiosity grew. These beings, despite their alien appearance, showed clear signs of intelligence and social structure. The implications of this discovery were staggering. Finally, they emerged into a clearing dominated by a sprawling village of organic structures. And there, in the center of it all, was Queen Vesta. She lay on a bed of softly glowing moss, attended to by several of the alien beings. Joseph rushed forward, relief washing over him. "Your Majesty, are you all right?" Vesta's eyes fluttered open, a smile spreading across her face. "Joseph Warren, I should have known you'd be the one to find me." As Dr. Talara moved to examine the Queen, Vesta explained her situation. "These beings, the Lumari, they saved my life. They possess remarkable healing abilities, channeling their own life force to repair injury and illness." Joseph watched in fascination as one of the Lumari placed a tentacle on Vesta's forehead, its body pulsing with bioluminescent energy that seemed to flow into the Klingon Queen. "This is incredible," Joseph breathed. "The scientific and diplomatic possibilities are endless. We should establish formal contact with the Lumari immediately." Vesta nodded in agreement, her eyes gleaming with the political implications of this discovery. Indeed, this could be a powerful new ally for the Empire. As they prepared to depart with a small delegation of Lumari, Joseph's communicator crackled to life. Ambassador Corral's grave voice filled the air. "Joseph, we have a situation. Lieutenant Mcka has seized control of key systems on the flagship. He's demanding Queen Vesta denounce the Human-Klingon alliance and exile you. If his terms aren't met, he'll destroy your ship upon return." A heavy silence fell over the group. Joseph's mind raced, analyzing their options. Then his eyes fell on the Lumari, still pulsing with their strange energy. "I have an idea," he said slowly, turning to Dr. Tilara. "These beings can share their life force. Is there a way we could harness that power to enhance our own abilities?" Tilara's eyes widened with understanding. "Fascinating. Yes, I believe I could develop a safe method for a temporary bond. It would require intimate contact to establish the connection, but the potential boost to our physical capabilities could be significant." Joseph nodded, his decision made. "Let's do it. We'll need every advantage we can get to retake the ship." The process of bonding with the Lumari was intense and deeply personal. Joseph found himself mentally and physically entwined with one of the alien beings, their life energies merging in a rush of sensation and awareness. As the connection solidified, he felt a surge of power coursing through his body, his senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. Beside him, Queen Vesta gasped as she completed her own bond. Their eyes met, and Joseph felt an additional layer of connection forming between them, their shared experience with the Lumari creating a new level of understanding and intimacy. As the enhanced rescue team boarded their ship, the weight of their mission settled upon them. Joseph took his place at the helm, his body humming with newfound energy. He glanced at Vesta, seeing his own grit mirrored in her eyes. The ship lifted off, breaking through the moon's atmosphere and into the star-studded expanse of space. Ahead loomed the massive Klingon flagship, its imposing silhouette a stark reminder of the challenges that awaited them. Joseph's hands tightened on the controls as they approached, his mind already formulating strategies to overcome Mcka's forces. With the power of the Lumari coursing through him and the fate of multiple worlds hanging in the balance, he prepared himself for the battle to come. "Come!" With a deep breath, he initiated the final approach sequence. As they neared the imposing Klingon flagship, Joseph's fingers danced across the control panel, activating the rescue ship's cloaking device. The vessel shimmered and vanished from sight, becoming invisible to both the naked eye and most scanning systems. "Cloaking device engaged," he announced, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through him. "We're approaching undetected." Queen Vesta nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anticipation and concern. "Excellent. Let's hope Mcka hasn't implemented any new security protocols." The rescue team gathered around the transporter pad, their bodies still humming with the residual energy from their Lumari bond. Joseph could feel the power coursing through him, sharpening his senses and heightening his awareness. He locked eyes with Vesta, and a spark of understanding passed between them. "Remember," Joseph addressed the team, "our goal is to regain control of the ship with minimal casualties. Stick to the plan, and let's end this quickly." With a nod from Vesta, Dr. Tilara activated the transporter. The team dematerialized in a shimmer of energy, rematerializing moments later in a dimly lit cargo hold aboard the flagship. Joseph's enhanced senses immediately kicked into overdrive. He could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines, feel the vibrations through the deck plates, and even detect the subtle shifts in air currents as they moved. He held up a hand, signaling the others to remain still as he focused on the sounds around them. "2 patrols," he whispered, one heading aft, the other towards the bridge. "We're clear for now." Vesta stepped forward, her movements fluid and graceful. "Lead the way, Joseph. Your senses are our best guide through this labyrinth." As they moved through the corridors, Joseph found himself hyper-aware of Vesta's presence beside him. Their shared experience with the Lumari had created a connection he couldn't quite explain. Suddenly, Vesta's voice echoed in his mind, clear as day. "Joseph, can you hear me?" He nearly stumbled in surprise but managed to maintain his composure. Focusing his thoughts, he responded mentally. "Loud and clear, Your Majesty. It seems our Lumari enhancements have some unexpected benefits." A ghost of a smile played across Vesta's lips as they continued their stealthy advance. Their newfound telepathic link allowed them to coordinate their movements with uncanny precision, anticipating each other's actions and reacting as one. As they approached the engineering section, Joseph sensed a group of Mcka's loyalists guarding the entrance. He signaled the team to halt, then communicated silently with Vesta. 6 guards, heavily armed. We'll need to take them out quickly and quietly. Vesta's mental response was tinged with a warrior's eagerness. I'll take the 3 on the left. You handle the right, on my mark. In a blur of motion, Joseph and Vesta launched their attack. Their enhanced strength and speed made them nearly invisible to the naked eye as they moved. Joseph's fist connected with the first guard's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. A swift elbow to the temple dropped the second, while a leg sweep took down the third. Beside him, Vesta was a whirlwind of controlled violence. Her movements were precise and deadly, each strike calculated for maximum effect. In a matter of seconds, all 6 guards lay unconscious at their feet. Dr. Tilara rushed forward, her fingers flying over the door's control panel. With a soft hiss, the engineering bay doors slid open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Mcka's engineers worked frantically at various stations, oblivious to the intrusion. Joseph and Vesta shared a silent nod before springing into action. They moved through the room like twin storms, disabling Mcka's loyalists with ruthless efficiency. Joseph felt the rush of adrenaline mixing with the Lumari energy, his body responding with inhuman speed and strength. As the last engineer fell, Dr. Tilara hurried to the main control console. Her fingers danced across the interface, her Vulcan mind working in perfect harmony with the ship's systems. I'm beginning the process of undoing Mcka's lockouts, she announced. It will take some time to fully restore control to Queen Vesta. Joseph nodded, already formulating their next move. We'll leave a small team here to protect you and the engineering systems. The rest of us need to make our way to the bridge. As they prepared to leave, Joseph felt a subtle shift in his body. The heightened awareness that had become almost second nature began to dim slightly. He caught Vesta's eye and saw the same realization reflected there. The Lumari enhancement, Vesta said aloud, her voice tinged with concern. It's beginning to fade. Joseph flexed his hand, feeling the strength slowly ebbing away. We need to move fast. The clock's ticking on our advantage. With renewed urgency, they set out for the bridge. As they moved through the ship's corridors, Joseph relied increasingly on his training and instincts rather than the fading alien energy. He could feel Vesta's presence in his mind growing fainter, their telepathic link weakening with each passing moment. They encountered sporadic resistance as they neared the bridge, but their team moved with practiced precision, subduing Mcka's supporters quickly and efficiently. Joseph found himself working in perfect sync with Vesta, their movements complementing each other even as their enhanced abilities faded. Finally, they reached the bridge. Joseph paused at the entrance, his senses straining to assess the situation within. He turned to Vesta, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent communication. Whatever lay beyond those doors, they would face it together. With a deep breath, Joseph pressed the door release. The bridge doors slid open, revealing Mcka and his most loyal followers waiting for them, weapons at the ready. The rebel leader's eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and triumph as he regarded Joseph and Vesta. So, Mcka sneered, the human and the queen return. How fitting that you should be here to witness the end of your misguided alliance. Joseph stepped forward, his stance firm despite the nearly complete dissipation of the Lumari energy. It's over, Mcka. Surrender now and we can end this without further bloodshed. Mcka's laugh was harsh and mirthless. You still don't understand, do you? I hold all the cards here. He gestured to a nearby console. With the press of a button, I can overload the warp core and destroy this ship, along with your precious alliance. Tension filled the air as Joseph assessed their options. The fading Lumari enhancement left him feeling vulnerable, but he refused to show any weakness. Beside him, Vesta stood tall, her regal bearing undiminished by the loss of their temporary powers. As Mcka began to monologue about the purity of Klingon culture and the folly of allying with humans, Joseph's mind raced. He knew that their next move would determine not just their own fate, but the future of human-Klingon relations. With the last whispers of their telepathic link, he shared a final thought with Vesta. Together, he projected, feeling her agreement resonate through their fading connection. In that moment, as Mcka reached for the warp core controls, Joseph and Vesta sprang into action, their movements synchronized despite the loss of their enhanced abilities. The bridge erupted into chaos as the final confrontation began, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. Joseph and Vesta moved as one, their bodies in perfect sync despite the loss of their enhanced abilities. They launched themselves at Mcka, catching the rebel leader off guard with their coordinated attack. In the ensuing chaos, alarms blared and weapons fire lit up the bridge. Joseph ducked under a wild swing from one of Mcka's supporters, using his momentum to throw the Klingon over his shoulder. Vesta, her royal training evident in every movement, disarmed two more rebels with swift, precise strikes. As the fight raged on, Dr. Talara's voice crackled over the ship's comm system. Control has been restored to the main systems. Security teams are en route to the bridge. Hearing this, Mcka snarled and lunged for the warp core controls. Joseph, seeing the danger, threw himself at the rebel leader. They grappled fiercely, each fighting for control of the ship's fate. With a surge of strength, Joseph managed to pin Mcka's arm, preventing him from reaching the console. Vesta, having subdued the remaining rebels, rushed to Joseph's aid. Together they overpowered Mcka just as loyalist security forces stormed the bridge. The rebellion was over. In the days that followed, as the ship made its way back to Klingon space, Joseph and Vesta found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of debriefings and strategy sessions. The aftermath of Mcka's failed coup required delicate handling, both to maintain stability within the Klingon Empire and to preserve the fragile human-Klingon alliance. As they approached Kronos, the Klingon homeworld, Joseph and Vesta were summoned to a secure communications room. The imposing visage of Chancellor Martok, leader of the Klingon High Council, filled the view screen. Queen Vesta, Martok's gravelly voice resonated through the room. You will return to Kronos immediately for a full debriefing. Bring the human Joseph and a small delegation of these Lumari with you. The Council is most interested in hearing about recent events. Vesta bowed her head respectfully. As you command, Chancellor. We shall arrive within 2 solar days. As the transmission ended, Joseph turned to Vesta, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. The High Council? I didn't expect to be included in such high-level discussions. Vesta's eyes gleamed with a hint of amusement. You've played a crucial role in these events, Joseph. Your presence will be invaluable. During the journey to Kronos, Joseph found himself spending increasing amounts of time with Vesta. Their conversations, ostensibly focused on preparing for the High Council meeting, often drifted into more personal territory. One evening, as they sat in Vesta's private quarters reviewing diplomatic protocols, the Klingon Queen's curiosity got the better of her. Tell me, Joseph, how do humans typically express romantic interest in one another? Joseph, caught off guard by the question, felt heat rising to his cheeks. Well, there are many ways. Some might give gifts. Others might plan special outings or dinners. Physical touch often plays a role, too. Holding hands, embracing, that sort of thing. Vesta leaned forward, her eyes intent. Fascinating. Perhaps you could demonstrate some of these techniques? Heart racing, Joseph tentatively reached out and took Vesta's hand in his own. The warmth of her skin, the strength in her fingers, sent a jolt through him. He found himself lost in her gaze, the intensity of the moment building between them. Meanwhile, in the ship's laboratory, Dr. Talara worked tirelessly on her research into Lumari biology. Her fingers flew across holographic displays, analyzing complex molecular structures and energy patterns. Fascinating, she murmured, her Vulcan composure slipping slightly as she made a breakthrough. The mechanism behind their life force sharing, it's not entirely biological. There's a quantum entanglement component that could potentially be replicated in other species. As she delved deeper into her findings, Talara became increasingly aware of the far-reaching implications of her research. The ability to temporarily grant enhanced abilities without direct Lumari assistance could revolutionize not just medicine, but military strategy as well. As the ship entered Klingon space, Joseph noticed a change in the behavior of the younger Klingon crew members. They watched him with a mix of curiosity and admiration, some even attempting to emulate his mannerisms and speech patterns. During a training session in the ship's gymnasium, a group of young warriors approached Joseph. Their leader, a fierce-looking female named Katara, spoke up. "We wish to learn your combat techniques, Joseph. They are most effective." Joseph, surprised but pleased, began demonstrating some basic human martial arts moves. As the impromptu class progressed, he couldn't help but notice the eager way the young Klingons absorbed every detail, their eyes shining with a newfound respect for human culture. Finally, the ship arrived at Kronos. As they prepared to beam down to the planet's surface, Vesta pulled Joseph aside. "The High Council will test you, Joseph. They will probe for weakness, for any reason to dismiss the value of our alliance. You must be strong." Joseph nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As the transporter beam engulfed them, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The fate of two species now rested in part on his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Klingon politics. They materialized in the imposing Great Hall of the Klingon High Council. The massive chamber, adorned with ancient weapons and battle flags, seemed to vibrate with the weight of history. At the far end, seated on a raised dais, Chancellor Martok regarded them with a piercing gaze. "Step forward, human," Martok's voice boomed across the hall. "Let us see if you are truly worthy of the honor bestowed upon you." As Joseph moved to comply, he felt Vesta's hand brush against his, a fleeting touch of reassurance. Drawing a deep breath, he strode toward the dais, ready to face whatever trials the Klingon Empire had in store for him. Joseph. Drawing a deep breath, he strode towards the dais, ready to face whatever trials the Klingon Empire had in store for him. Chancellor Martok's piercing gaze swept over Joseph, assessing every detail of the human's stance and demeanor. "Joseph of Earth," he intoned, his voice echoing through the great hall. "You stand before us as an ally of Queen Vesta and a supposed friend to the Klingon Empire. But words are wind. Actions are what truly define a warrior." The Chancellor rose from his seat, towering over Joseph. "You will undergo the rite of ascension, a sacred trial that tests the mettle of our finest warriors. Though you are not Klingon, we shall see if you possess the strength and honor worthy of our respect." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members. Joseph felt Vesta's eyes on him, her concern palpable even from a distance. He nodded firmly, accepting the challenge without hesitation. Martok gestured to a group of armored Klingons. "Escort him to the sacred chamber. Let the rite begin." As Joseph was led away, Dr. Talara approached him discreetly. "I have developed an experimental enhancement based on Lumari biology," she whispered. "It could significantly improve your chances of success." Joseph considered the offer for a moment, then shook his head. "Thank you, Doctor, but no. I need to do this as myself, with only my natural abilities." Talara raised an eyebrow but nodded in understanding. "A logical choice given the circumstances. Good luck, Joseph." The sacred chamber was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with ancient Klingon symbols that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight. Joseph stood at its center, acutely aware of the High Council, Queen Vesta, and Federation representatives observing from elevated platforms around the perimeter. A gong sounded, signaling the start of the rite. Immediately, Joseph felt the temperature in the chamber plummet. His breath misted in front of him as the cold bit into his skin. He gritted his teeth, refusing to shiver as ice crystals formed on his eyelashes. Just as his body began to adapt to the freezing conditions, the temperature abruptly soared. Sweat beaded on Joseph's brow as the air shimmered with heat. He focused on his breathing, using techniques he had learned during his time on the Klingon ship to regulate his body's response. Through it all, Joseph remained upright, his face a mask of willpower. He caught glimpses of the Klingon observers, their expressions a mix of surprise and grudging respect. As the temperature stabilized, a Klingon warrior approached, carrying a massive stone weight. "Carry this across the coals," he growled, indicating a path of glowing embers that had appeared on the chamber floor. Joseph hefted the weight, his muscles straining under its mass. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the burning coals. Pain lanced through his feet with each step, but he pressed on, his eyebrows furrowed tightly to prevent any sound from escaping. Halfway across the path, Joseph's arms began to tremble from the exertion. He could feel blisters forming on his soles, each step becoming more agonizing than the last. But he refused to falter, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed. As he reached the end of the coal path and set down the weight, Joseph heard murmurs of approval from the Klingon observers. Queen Vesta's face was a study in controlled emotion, pride warring with concern in her eyes. There was no time to rest. A line of Klingon warriors formed before Joseph, each wielding a pain stick crackling with energy. "Pass through us," one of them snarled, "and do not cry out." Joseph squared his shoulders and began to move. The first touch of a pain stick sent fire coursing through his nerves, but he bit back the scream that threatened to escape. He weaved between the warriors, each shock more intense than the last. His vision blurred, his body screaming for relief, but Joseph pressed on. He drew on memories of his training, of the challenges he had faced alongside Vesta and her crew. Each step was an act of will, a refusal to yield to the pain. As he emerged from the gauntlet, Joseph stood tall, despite the tremors racking his body. The Klingon observers leaned forward, their interest piqued by this display of human resilience. Chancellor Martok's voice boomed through the chamber. "The final test approaches, human. Face your opponent in honorable combat." A seasoned Klingon warrior stepped forward, his muscled frame dwarfing Joseph's. They circled each other, the Klingon's eyes gleaming with battle lust. The fight began in a flurry of strikes and counterstrikes. Joseph, drawing on his unique blend of human martial arts and Klingon combat techniques, managed to hold his ground against the relentless assault. As they grappled and struck, Joseph's mind raced, analyzing his opponent's movements. He noticed a slight hesitation in the Klingon's left side, a barely perceptible favoring of his right leg. An old battle injury, perhaps. Seizing his opportunity, Joseph feinted to the right before abruptly changing direction. He slipped past the Klingon's guard and struck at the weak point, using leverage to throw his larger opponent off balance. In a move that stunned the onlookers, Joseph managed to disarm the Klingon warrior, sending his weapon clattering across the chamber floor. With a final, decisive strike, he sent his opponent crashing to the ground. Silence fell over the sacred chamber. Joseph stood over his fallen opponent, chest heaving, blood trickling from a dozen wounds. He looked up at Chancellor Martok, awaiting judgment. The High Council convened, their heated debate carrying to Joseph's ears in snatches of guttural Klingon. Finally, Martok stepped forward, his expression inscrutable. "Joseph of Earth," he began, his voice filling the chamber, "you have faced the rite of ascension with a courage and cunning that would do honor to any Klingon warrior. Though you have not completed the rite to our traditional standards, your unique approach and undeniable endurance have impressed this council." Martok paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber before settling back on Joseph. "We hereby grant you the title of Kas Devil, worthy outsider. You shall serve as a liaison between our peoples, a bridge between human and Klingon ways." A ripple of surprise and excitement passed through the audience. Joseph bowed his head in acceptance, overwhelmed by the implications of this new status. As the formal proceedings concluded, Queen Vesta descended from her platform, her eyes locked on Joseph. Without a word, she took his arm and led him towards a private chamber, clearly intent on tending to his wounds herself. As they left the sacred chamber, Joseph could feel the weight of countless eyes upon them. He knew that this moment, this connection between human and Klingon, would have far-reaching consequences. But for now, exhausted and triumphant, he allowed himself to lean on Vesta's strength, grateful for her unwavering support. The door to the private chamber closed behind them, shutting out the world and its expectations. For a moment, they were not a human liaison and a Klingon queen, but simply two beings drawn together by shared experiences and mutual respect. As Vesta began to treat his injuries with surprising gentleness, Joseph realized that their journey together was nowhere near the end. In fact, it seemed as though a new chapter was just beginning. Beginning. As Vesta tended to Joseph's wounds with gentle precision, a comfortable silence settled between them. "You have impressed many today," Vesta said softly, her eyes fixed on a particularly nasty burn on Joseph's arm. "But the true challenge lies ahead." Joseph nodded, wincing slightly as she applied a soothing Klingon ointment to his injury. "I know. This is just the beginning of our journey together." Over the next few days, Joseph found himself in a Klingon medical facility, his body healing under the combined efforts of advanced Klingon techniques and Dr. Tilara's expertise in human physiology. The room buzzed with activity as Klingon healers and Federation medical staff worked side by side, their collaboration a microcosm of the broader alliance forming between their peoples. Queen Vesta was a constant presence during Joseph's recovery, often spending hours by his bedside. Their conversations ranged from the political implications of recent events to more personal matters, deepening their bond with each passing day. "Chancellor Martok has called for a grand feast," Vesta informed him during one of her visits. "It will be held in the Great Hall, a celebration of our strengthening alliance." Joseph sat up, his muscles protesting the movement. "A feast? That sounds intense." Vesta's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Indeed. You will need to learn our customs quickly. I will oversee your training myself." True to her word, as soon as Joseph was well enough to leave the medical facility, Vesta began his intensive crash course in Klingon etiquette. They spent hours in a private chamber of the Great Hall, surrounded by various Klingon delicacies and ceremonial items. "Now watch closely," Vesta instructed, holding up a writhing handful of gog. "The key is to consume them while they're still alive. It's considered an insult to the chef if they die before reaching your mouth." Joseph swallowed hard, eyeing the squirming mass of serpent worms. "Right, alive. Got it." He reached for the gog, steeling himself as he felt the creatures wriggling against his palm. With a deep breath, he brought them to his mouth, forcing himself to focus on Vesta's approving nod, rather than the sensation of the live worm sliding down his throat. "Very good," Vesta praised, a hint of pride in her voice. "Now let's move on to the proper way to drink blood wine." As Joseph's training progressed, whispers of discontent began to circulate through the halls of Konos. The House of Duras, long known for its conservative stance, started spreading rumors questioning Joseph's motives and his relationship with Queen Vesta. "I've heard talk," Vesta said one evening, her voice low as they practiced the intricate steps of a Klingon war dance. "Some believe you're part of a Federation plot to weaken us from within." Joseph paused mid-step, his brow furrowing. "That's ridiculous. How could they think that after everything we've been through?" Vesta's expression hardened. "Fear and suspicion run deep in some of our houses. We must be prepared for challenges at the feast." The night of the celebration arrived with an air of tension underlying the festive atmosphere. Joseph stood before a mirror in his quarters, adjusting the ceremonial baldric that marked his status as Kostevwo. The Klingon formal wear felt heavy and foreign on his body, a constant reminder of his otherness. As he entered the Great Hall alongside Queen Vesta, a hush fell over the assembled dignitaries. Klingon warriors and Federation officials alike turned to stare at the unlikely pair. Joseph could feel the weight of their gazes, some curious, others hostile. Chancellor Martok's voice boomed through the hall, silencing the murmurs. "Tonight we celebrate the strengthening of our alliance with the humans. Let the feast begin." The air filled with battle cries as servers brought out platters of fresh gag and steaming targ meat. Joseph took his place at the high table, acutely aware of the eyes watching his every move. He reached for the gog, remembering Vesta's lessons, and consumed it with as much enthusiasm as he could muster. As the feast progressed and blood wine flowed freely, the atmosphere grew more heated. Debates erupted across the hall, voices rising as Klingons argued over the merits of the human alliance. "A joint military exercise," one warrior bellowed, responding to Martok's announcement. "Finally, a chance to test our mettle against Federation forces." "Bah," another spat. "It's a ploy to weaken us, to dilute our warrior culture with human softness." Joseph found himself drawn into these debates, forced to defend his position and prove his worth to increasingly aggressive Klingon warriors. He drew on his training and experiences, his words carefully chosen to appeal to the Klingon sense of honor and glory. As the night wore on, the tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. Joseph was in the midst of a heated discussion with a group of younger warriors when a loud voice cut through the din. "You dare to wear our ceremonial garb, human?" The hall fell silent as all eyes turned to the source of the challenge. A burly Klingon wearing the colors of the House of Duras stood, his face contorted with anger. "You may have impressed some with your tricks," the Klingon continued, his words slightly slurred from blood wine, "but you have no right to claim a place among us. And as for your relationship with Queen Vesta," he let the implication hang in the air, his sneer leaving no doubt about his meaning. The great hall seemed to hold its breath as Joseph slowly rose to his feet. He could feel the eyes of every Klingon and Federation official upon him, waiting to see how he would respond to this direct challenge to his honor and position. Joseph's mind raced, acutely aware that his next words could determine the fate of the human-Klingon alliance. He knew he couldn't back down, but neither could he respond with the kind of violence that might undo all the progress they had made. Taking a deep breath, Joseph stepped forward, his eyes locked on his challenger. The future of two worlds hung in the balance as he opened his mouth to speak. "Speak." His voice, steady and clear, carried through the great hall. "I accept your challenge," Joseph said, his eyes never leaving the Duras warrior. "But I propose we settle this in a manner that honors both our traditions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chancellor Martok leaned forward, intrigued. "I invoke the ancient custom of honor by proxy," Joseph continued. "Instead of direct combat, let us engage in a test of stamina and endurance. Let our strength be measured not just in brute force, but in the ability to endure and persevere." The Duras warrior Korg sneered. "You seek to avoid true combat, human?" "On the contrary," Joseph replied, his voice firm, "I offer a challenge that will push us both to our limits, in ways that simple combat cannot." Chancellor Martok rose from his seat, his voice booming across the hall. "The human speaks with wisdom beyond his years. I approve this contest. Joseph and Korg will face a series of trials over the next 3 days, designed to test their physical and mental limits. The High Council and our Federation guests will bear witness." As the hall erupted in a mix of approving roars and skeptical mutters, Queen Vesta caught Joseph's eye. Her expression was a mixture of pride and concern. Later that night, in a quiet corner of the Great Hall, Vesta pulled Joseph aside. "You've put yourself in great danger," she said, her voice low. "Korg is known for his exceptional stamina, even among Klingons." Joseph nodded, his face set with willpower. "I know the risks, but this is our best chance to bridge the divide. Human endurance has its own unique advantages." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Tilara. The Vulcan doctor's face was impassive as always, but there was a hint of concern in her voice. "I have been informed of the upcoming trials. With your permission, I would like to monitor your vital signs during the contest, using a combination of Federation and Klingon medical technology." Joseph agreed, grateful for the support. As they discussed the details, the gravity of the challenge ahead settled over him. The first day of the contest dawned bright and harsh. Joseph and Korg stood at the start of a treacherous obstacle course, heavy weights strapped to their backs. The course stretched out before them, a daunting mix of towering walls, bubbling lava pits, and dense thorny vegetation. At Martok's signal, they launched into action. Joseph's lighter frame allowed him to move with agility, scaling the first wall with surprising speed. He could hear Korg's labored breathing behind him as they navigated the course. The lava pits posed a particular challenge. The heat was intense, threatening to overwhelm Joseph's senses. He focused on his breathing, using techniques Dr. Tilara had taught him to manage his body's responses. He leapt across the pits, feeling the searing heat on his face with each bound. As they reached the dense brush, Korg's raw strength began to show. The Klingon warrior plowed through the thorny vegetation, his tough skin seemingly impervious to the sharp barbs. Joseph had to rely on his agility, weaving through gaps and using his smaller size to his advantage. They emerged from the course almost simultaneously, both gasping for breath and covered in cuts and burns. The assembled Klingons roared their approval, surprised and impressed by Joseph's performance. The second day brought a new challenge: pain endurance. Joseph and Korg stood side by side as Klingon officials approached with pain sticks. The crowd watched in tense silence as the sticks were applied to various parts of their bodies, the intensity increasing with each touch. Joseph gritted his teeth, his body screaming in agony. He drew upon the meditation techniques Talara had taught him, compartmentalizing the pain and pushing it to the edges of his consciousness. His face remained stoic, even as the pain reached levels he had never experienced before. Korg, for his part, seemed to relish the pain, letting out bellowing war cries with each application of the pain sticks. But as the intensity increased, even he began to show signs of strain. As the day wore on, whispers spread through the crowd. Joseph's performance was beyond what many had thought possible for a human. Young Klingons watched with fascination, some openly discussing the merits of human training methods. By the end of the second day, both Joseph and Korg were exhausted but unbowed. The air in the Great Hall was charged with anticipation for the final trial. As Joseph retired to his quarters to rest, he could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders. Tomorrow would determine not just the outcome of this contest, but potentially the future of human-Klingon relations. In the quiet of his room, Joseph began his preparations for the grueling final day ahead. He knew that the true test of his endurance was yet to come. As Joseph settled into a meditative state, focusing on his breathing and visualizing the challenges ahead, a soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called out, his voice steady despite the fatigue weighing on his body. Queen Vesta stepped into the room, her presence commanding even in the dimly lit space. Her eyes met Joseph's, conveying a mix of pride and concern. "The final trial begins at dawn," she said, her voice low and intense. "Are you prepared for what lies ahead?" Joseph nodded, rising to his feet with a slight wince. "As ready as I'll ever be. What can you tell me about the course?" Vesta's lips curved into a grim smile. "It is designed to push you beyond your limits. You will face the harshest terrains Kronos has to offer, from the scorching Hammer Mountains to the frozen wastes of Kristak." As she spoke, Joseph moved to a nearby table where his modified Klingon armor lay. He ran his fingers over the sleek surface, appreciating the human-inspired design that had been incorporated into the traditional Klingon structure. "This armor," Vesta continued, following his gaze, "may prove to be your greatest asset. Its design should allow for better heat dissipation and flexibility than standard Klingon armor." Joseph nodded, his mind already racing through the potential challenges. "And Korg, what can I expect from him?" "He is formidable," Vesta admitted. "His strength is legendary, even among Klingons. But remember, Joseph, this trial is about more than brute force. It will test your endurance, your adaptability, your very spirit." As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the sky, Joseph stood at the starting line, his modified armor gleaming in the early morning light. Beside him, Korg loomed like a mountain, his face set in a determined scowl. The air was thick with tension as Chancellor Martok's voice boomed across the assembled crowd. "Today we witness the final trial. May honor and glory be bestowed upon the victor." With a thunderous roar from the crowd, the race began. Joseph and Korg launched forward, their feet pounding against the hard-packed earth as they made their way towards the looming Hamar Mountains. The heat hit Joseph like a physical force as they entered the mountain range. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, quickly evaporating in the scorching air. He could feel the armor working, its advanced design helping to regulate his body temperature. Beside him, Korg's breathing grew labored, the Klingon's larger frame struggling more with the intense heat. Hours passed as they traversed the unforgiving terrain. Joseph's muscles burned with exertion, but he pushed on, drawing on his training in sheer force of will. As they crested a particularly steep incline, the landscape before them shifted dramatically. The scorching heat of the Hammer Mountains gave way to the biting cold of the Kristak wasteland. The sudden temperature change sent a shock through Joseph's system, but he pressed on, his human physiology adapting more quickly to the shift than Korg's Klingon biology. Ice crunched beneath their feet as they raced across frozen tundras. Joseph's lighter frame allowed him to move swiftly across the treacherous terrain, while Korg's heavier build caused him to sink slightly with each step. However, when they reached a series of towering ice cliffs, Korg's superior strength came into play. The Klingon warrior scaled the sheer faces with powerful efficiency, momentarily taking the lead. Joseph gritted his teeth, pushing his burning muscles to their limit as he climbed. He could hear Korg's labored breathing just ahead, spurring him to greater efforts. As they reached the summit of the final cliff, Joseph caught sight of their next challenge, the dense jungles of Kang's summit. Plunging into the thick vegetation, Joseph immediately became aware of the numerous threats surrounding them. Poisonous plants brushed against his armor, their toxic sap leaving streaks across the metal. In the distance, he could hear the roars and screeches of Kronos' dangerous native fauna. Thinking quickly, Joseph grabbed a sturdy branch from a nearby tree, using his armor's sharp edges to fashion it into a crude spear. As they ran, he used the makeshift weapon to push aside dangerous plants and defend against any approaching predators. Korg, true to his Klingon nature, took a more direct approach. Joseph could hear the sounds of combat behind him as the Klingon warrior engaged directly with the hostile wildlife, his battle cries echoing through the dense foliage. As they emerged from the jungle, the final stage of their trial lay before them, the volcanic badlands of the Krios Chasm. Rivers of molten lava flowed between narrow rock bridges, the air shimmering with heat and toxic fumes. Joseph's lungs burned as he carefully navigated the treacherous pathways. His armor, while providing some protection, couldn't fully shield him from the intense heat. He could see Korg struggling as well, the Klingon's face contorted with effort as they pushed their bodies to the absolute limit. The finish line appeared in the distance, a beacon of hope amidst the hellish landscape. Joseph and Korg locked eyes for a brief moment, a wordless acknowledgement passing between them. Then, with a final surge of energy, they both sprinted towards the end. Joseph's world narrowed to the pounding of his heart, the burning of his muscles, and the finish line growing ever closer. He could sense Korg beside him, the Klingon warrior matching him step for step. With a final desperate lunge, Joseph threw himself across the line, collapsing onto the ground as the roar of the crowd washed over him. As his vision began to blur, Joseph became aware of figures rushing towards him. He felt the cool touch of medical instruments against his skin and heard Dr. Talara's calm voice giving orders. But before he could fully process what was happening, exhaustion overcame him and the world faded to black. Black. When Joseph regained consciousness, he found himself in a dimly lit medical bay. The familiar hum of Klingon medical equipment filled the air, punctuated by the soft beeps of Federation monitors. As his vision cleared, he saw Dr. Talara standing over him, her face a mask of professional concern. "Welcome back, Joseph," she said, her voice calm and measured. "You've been unconscious for approximately 47 hours. Your vital signs are stable, but you pushed your body to its absolute limits during the trials." Before Joseph could respond, the door to the medical bay slid open with a hiss. Queen Vesta strode in, her regal bearing at odds with the worry evident in her eyes. She moved to Joseph's bedside, placing a hand on his arm. "You have brought great honor to yourself and to humanity," she said, her voice low and intense. "The entire empire speaks of your feat." Joseph tried to sit up, wincing at the protest from his aching muscles. "What happened? Who won?" A rare smile crossed Vesta's face. "It was a tie, Joseph. You and Korg crossed the finish line simultaneously. The High Council has declared you both victorious." The implications of this outcome began to sink in as Joseph processed the news. Before he could fully grasp the situation, Chancellor Martok's imposing figure filled the doorway. "Ah, our human warrior awakens," Martok's voice boomed through the room. "Your performance has sparked a fire in the heart of the Empire, Joseph. Even now, changes are sweeping across Kronos." Over the next hour, Martok outlined the reforms he had set in motion. Joseph listened in amazement as the Chancellor described the integration of human training methods into Klingon military academies and the establishment of cultural exchange programs. When Martok announced Joseph's appointment as head of a new diplomatic corps, the human felt a mix of pride and trepidation. As Martok concluded his briefing, Queen Vesta stepped forward, her eyes locked on Joseph's. "There is one more matter we must discuss," she said, her voice carrying a note of anticipation. "I have declared my intention to take you as my mate, Joseph. We will undergo the Kalhaya, the traditional Klingon mating ritual." Joseph's heart raced at the pronouncement. He had grown close to Vesta during his time on Konos, but the prospect of a formal union carried weighty implications for both their personal lives and interstellar relations. Dr. Talara, ever the voice of medical reason, interjected, "The Kalhaya is an extremely demanding ritual, both physically and mentally. Given your recent ordeal, I must advise caution." Vesta nodded, acknowledging the doctor's concerns. "We will allow time for Joseph to recover his strength. The ritual will take place in 1 month's time." As Joseph's recovery progressed, he found himself thrust into the center of a rapidly evolving political landscape. Young Klingons, inspired by his performance in the trials, flocked to what was being called the Joseph movement. They sought to emulate his training methods and embrace a more open attitude toward other cultures. However, not all reactions were positive. Conservative factions, particularly those aligned with the remnants of the House of Duras, began to voice their opposition to the changes sweeping the empire. Joseph received reports of growing unrest and whispers of potential violence. Amidst the political turmoil, Joseph threw himself into preparations for the Kalhaya. Queen Vesta personally oversaw his training in Klingon martial arts and ritual combat. Their sessions were intense, blending physical exertion with an exploration of each other's cultures and bodies. During one particularly grueling training session, Vesta pinned Joseph to the mat, their faces inches apart. "You must be prepared for anything in the Kalhaya," she growled, her breath hot on his skin. "Our enemies will seek to exploit any weakness." Joseph nodded, acutely aware of the heat radiating from Vesta's body. "I won't let you down," he promised, his voice husky with exertion and something more. As the day of the Kalhaya approached, the atmosphere on Konos grew increasingly tense. Joseph found himself constantly on guard, wary of the assassination attempts that had already claimed the lives of several of his security detail. The arrival of a Federation delegation led by Admiral Janeway added another layer of complexity to the situation. On the eve of the ritual, Joseph stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. He could see the specially prepared arena where he and Vesta would face the 7 trials of the Kalhaya. Billions across 2 worlds would be watching, the future of human-Klingon relations hanging in the balance. As the first rays of Kronos' sun began to peek over the horizon, Joseph made his way to the arena's entrance. Queen Vesta was waiting for him, resplendent in traditional Klingon armor. They exchanged a long look, volumes passing between them without a word. The massive doors of the arena swung open, revealing a complex array of obstacles and challenges. Joseph and Vesta stepped forward together, ready to face whatever the Kalhaya would throw at them. As they entered the arena, the roar of the crowd washed over them, a tide of anticipation and excitement. The first trial began, an intricate weapons demonstration that required perfect synchronization. Joseph and Vesta moved as one, their bodies flowing through the deadly dance of blades and batleths. As they wove through the complex patterns, Joseph felt a deep connection with Vesta that transcended their physical movements. Watching from the stands, even the most hardened Klingon warriors found themselves impressed by the display. The chemistry between Joseph and Vesta was undeniable, adding an unexpected layer of intimacy to the fierce ritual. As the couple completed the first trial, the arena erupted in thunderous applause. But this was only the beginning. 6 more trials lay ahead, each designed to push them to their limits. As Joseph and Vesta prepared for the second challenge, they knew that every move they made would shape the future of 2 worlds. As Joseph and Vesta prepared for the second challenge, they knew that every move they made would shape the future of their relationship and the alliance between their peoples. The arena floor shifted beneath their feet, transforming into a treacherous landscape that mirrored the diverse terrains of the Klingon Empire. Joseph's eyes widened as he took in the swampy bog before them, the sheer rock face looming in the distance, and the rivers of molten lava snaking through the arena's far end. "Ready?" Vesta growled, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Joseph nodded, his muscles coiled for action. "Let's show them what we can do together." They plunged into the swamp, fetid water splashing up to their thighs. Joseph's lighter frame allowed him to move more quickly through the muck, while Vesta's strength came into play as she effortlessly pushed aside fallen logs and dense vegetation. When Joseph's foot became ensnared in a tangle of underwater roots, Vesta was there in an instant, her powerful arms wrenching him free. As they reached the base of the cliff, Joseph took the lead. His nimble fingers found tiny crevices and ledges, allowing him to scale the sheer face with spider-like agility. Vesta followed, her raw power enabling her to pull herself up with ease. When a section of the cliff face crumbled under Joseph's grip, Vesta's lightning-fast reflexes saved him from a devastating fall. The lava field posed the greatest challenge yet. Heat shimmered in the air, making it difficult to see the safe paths across the molten rock. Joseph's keen eye for patterns allowed him to plot the safest route, while Vesta's unshakable balance kept them steady on the narrow stone bridges. As they crossed the finish line, the crowd's roar was deafening. Joseph and Vesta stood side by side, chests heaving, their bodies glistening with sweat and grime. The chemistry between them was palpable, their movements throughout the challenge having been perfectly in sync. Without pause, they were thrust into the third trial. A series of holographic puzzles materialized around them, each more complex than the last. Joseph's mind raced as he analyzed the patterns and symbols, calling out observations to Vesta. She, in turn, applied her knowledge of Klingon lore and history to decipher the cultural elements woven into the puzzles. As they worked, the floor beneath them began to heat up, forcing them to constantly shift their weight. Searing jets of steam erupted at random intervals, testing their focus and physical endurance. Joseph felt his skin blistering from the heat, but he pushed through the pain, his mind wholly focused on the task at hand. "The central glyph," Vesta grunted, sweat pouring down her face. "It's the symbol of Kalos, but inverted." Joseph's eyes lit up with understanding. "Rotate the outer ring counterclockwise," he called out, his voice hoarse from the superheated air. Their combined insights allowed them to solve puzzle after puzzle, impressing even the most skeptical of the Klingon elders watching from the stands. As the final hologram dissolved, signaling the end of the third trial, Joseph caught glimpses of approving nods from some of the battle-scarred veterans. The fourth trial began without warning. The arena transformed into a battlefield, with holographic opponents materializing around them. Joseph and Vesta stood back to back, their bodies instinctively moving in harmony. As the first wave of attackers charged, Joseph ducked low, allowing Vesta to swing her batleth in a wide arc over his head. He then sprang up, using her shoulders as a launching pad to deliver a flying kick to an opponent trying to flank them. Their fighting styles meshed seamlessly, Joseph's acrobatic maneuvers and quick strikes complementing Vesta's power and precision. They moved as one, anticipating each other's actions without need for words. The younger Klingons in the audience were on their feet, cheering wildly at the display of perfectly blended human and Klingon combat techniques. As the last holographic opponent fell, Joseph felt his legs buckle beneath him. The continuous trials had pushed his human physiology to its limits. He saw Dr. Tilara's concerned face in the medical observation booth, her fingers flying over her instruments as she monitored his vital signs. During the brief respite before the fifth trial, Tilara approached Joseph, a small device in her hand. "This neural stimulator," she explained quickly, "might give you the edge you need to complete the remaining trials, but the technology is experimental, and the risks are unknown." Joseph looked at the device, then at Vesta, who stood nearby, her face etched with concern and commitment. He thought of the stake, choice before him. The neural stimulator could give him the edge he needed to complete the remaining trials, but at what cost? He glanced at Vesta, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and unwavering support. "No," Joseph said firmly, pushing the device away. "We'll finish this together, without shortcuts." Vesta's face broke into a fierce grin, pride evident in her eyes. As it should be, my mate. As they re-entered the arena for the sixth trial, the crowd's roar swelled to a deafening crescendo. The controversy surrounding the neural stimulator had only heightened the anticipation, but Joseph and Vesta's decision to proceed without technological assistance had earned them respect from many observers. The arena floor shimmered and transformed, revealing a vast, holographically generated maze. Joseph and Vesta found themselves separated, placed at opposite ends of the labyrinth. The trial of unity begins. Chancellor Martok's voice boomed across the arena. Find each other and reach the center together. Only then will you prove your worth as a mated pair. Joseph took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He plunged into the maze, his senses on high alert. The residual effects of the neural stimulator began to manifest in unexpected ways. His perception sharpened, allowing him to notice subtle patterns in the maze's structure. As he navigated through twisting corridors, Joseph encountered holographic projections of hostile alien species. A Nausicaan brute materialized before him, swinging a jagged blade. Joseph ducked under the swing, using his enhanced reflexes to deliver a swift kick to the hologram's midsection. The Nausicaan flickered and vanished. Meanwhile, Vesta faced her own set of challenges. She barreled through a group of holographic Ferengi, her bat'leth singing as it cut through the air. Her strength and knowledge of Klingon lore allowed her to decipher cryptic symbols etched into the maze walls, guiding her path. Vesta, Joseph called out, his voice echoing through the labyrinth. Head east. I can see a pattern in the maze's layout. Understood. Vesta's reply came faintly from a distance. Be wary, Joseph. The challenges grow more difficult as we progress. Joseph pressed on, his heightened senses allowing him to avoid traps and pitfalls. He leaped over a section of floor that gave way to reveal a spike-filled pit, rolling to safety on the other side. As they drew closer to each other, the maze's defenses intensified. Joseph found himself face-to-face with a Jem'Hadar soldier, its holographic form eerily realistic. He ducked and weaved, using the Klingon combat techniques Vesta had taught him to outmaneuver the faster, stronger opponent. Joseph, Vesta's voice rang out, closer now. I'm approaching a chasm. It looks impassable. Joseph's mind raced, processing the information from his enhanced senses. It's an illusion, Vesta. Trust me and keep moving forward. He heard Vesta's war cry, followed by the sound of her boots hitting solid ground. A moment later, he rounded a corner and saw her, a triumphant grin on her face. Well done, my mate, she said, clasping his arm. Now, let us face the final challenge together. They turned to confront the center of the maze, where a massive holographic beast stood guard. The Herc, a creature of Klingon legend, towered over them, its multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Joseph and Vesta moved in perfect synchronization, their earlier trials having forged them into a seamless unit. Joseph darted in, drawing the Herc's attention while Vesta circled around to strike at its flank. They wove in and out, their movements fluid and precise. The crowd watched in awe as human agility merged with Klingon strength. Joseph leaped onto the Herc's back, using his enhanced perception to locate a weak point. Vesta now, he shouted. Vesta's bat'leth flashed, striking the exact spot Joseph had indicated. The Herc let out a deafening roar before dissolving into shimmering light. As the holographic environment faded away, Joseph and Vesta stood victorious in the center of the arena. The crowd's cheers were deafening, a mix of Klingon war cries and human applause. Chancellor Martok stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. The trial of unity is complete. Joseph and Vesta have proven their worth as a mated pair. Dr. Talara approached, her medical tricorder already scanning Joseph. Remarkable, she muttered. The neural stimulator has triggered unexpected adaptations in your cellular structure. It seems to be enhancing your natural abilities. Before Joseph could respond, a commotion erupted in the stands. A group of Klingons, their faces twisted in anger, pushed their way towards the arena floor. This is an outrage, one of them shouted, his voice carrying across the arena. We have evidence that Queen Vesta's bloodline is tainted with human ancestry. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs of shock and confusion. Joseph felt Vesta tense beside him, her hand gripping her betleth tightly. Chancellor Martok's face darkened with fury. These are serious allegations. We must convene an emergency session of the High Council immediately. As the political drama unfolded around them, Joseph and Vesta exchanged a look of commitment. They had come too far to let this derail their plans for unity between their peoples. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the political drama unfolded around them, Joseph and Vesta exchanged a look of grit. They had come too far to let this derail their plans for unity between their peoples. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The emergency session of the High Council erupted into chaos as they entered the chamber. Angry shouts and accusations filled the air, with conservative Klingons demanding answers about Vesta's lineage. Chancellor Martok's powerful voice cut through the din, calling for order. "Silence," he roared, his cybernetic eye glowing fiercely. "Queen Vesta and Joseph will be given the opportunity to address these allegations." As the chamber fell into an uneasy quiet, Vesta stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. "Esteemed members of the High Council," she began, her voice steady and clear, "what you are about to hear has been hidden from our people for centuries." Joseph watched in awe as Vesta unraveled a tale of human integration into Klingon society, dating back to a long-forgotten crash landing on a remote colony. Her words painted a vivid picture of survival, adaptation, and eventual assimilation that had led to a stronger, more resilient Klingon subspecies. As Vesta concluded her account, Joseph seized the moment to build upon her revelation. "Honorable Council," he said, his voice carrying the conviction of his beliefs, "this historical mixing of our peoples is not a weakness, but a strength. Many of your greatest warriors and leaders may carry traces of human DNA, contributing to their exceptional abilities." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Joseph could see the conflict playing out on the faces of the council members. Shock, disbelief, and for some, a grudging consideration of the possibilities. The conservative faction, led by the House of Dara, attempted to discredit their claims. "These are nothing but convenient lies," a Duras representative shouted, his face contorted with rage. "Where is the proof of these outlandish claims?" Before the situation could escalate further, Admiral Janeway stepped forward, her Starfleet uniform a stark contrast to the Klingon attire surrounding her. "If I may, Chancellor," she said, addressing Martok directly, "the Federation has technology that could verify these claims and explore the potential benefits of human-Klingon genetic compatibility." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as council members considered this new development. Joseph could see the calculating look in Martok's eyes as he weighed the political implications. "Very well," Martok declared, his voice cutting through the whispers. "We shall put this matter to a vote. The High Council will decide whether to proceed with the final trial of the Kalhaya and whether to allow Federation genetic research on human-Klingon compatibility." As the council began their deliberations, Joseph and Vesta were escorted to a secure chamber. The stress of the situation deeply affected upon them, but it also served to strengthen their bond. In the privacy of the chamber, they embraced, drawing comfort and strength from each other. "Whatever happens," Vesta said, her fingers intertwining with Joseph's, "we face it together." Joseph nodded, feeling a surge of affection for his mate. "Together," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Talara, her eyes alight with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating," she muttered, running her tricorder over Joseph. "The combination of your human DNA, the neural stimulators effects, and the Kalhaya trials have triggered unique genetic adaptations. You're becoming more compatible with Klingon physiology." Before they could fully process this information, the sound of shouting and clashing weapons erupted from beyond their chamber. The conservative faction, sensing their defeat, had decided to take matters into their own hands. Joseph and Vesta exchanged a quick glance, their decision made in an instant. Despite the guards' protests, they overpowered them and raced towards the council chamber. The government complex had devolved into chaos. Pockets of fighting broke out as they navigated the corridors, forcing Joseph and Vesta to work in perfect tandem. Joseph's enhanced agility allowed him to duck and weave through the fray, while Vesta's strength cleared a path when necessary. Their progress through the building became a living demonstration of human-Klingon cooperation. Young Klingon warriors watched in awe as Joseph used his human ingenuity to outsmart opponents, while Vesta's bat'leth sang through the air with deadly precision. As they neared the council chamber, they encountered a group of Duras loyalists blocking their path. Without hesitation, Joseph and Vesta launched into action. Joseph feinted left, drawing the attention of two warriors, while Vesta charged forward, her bat'leth clanging against their opponent's weapons. Joseph ducked under a wild swing, using his momentum to slide between the legs of a burly Klingon. As he came up behind the warrior, he delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster, a technique Vesta had taught him. The Klingon crumpled to the ground, momentarily stunned. Vesta, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of motion. Her bat'leth flashed in the artificial light as she parried and struck, her movements fluid and deadly. When a Duras loyalist managed to slip past her guard, Joseph was there in an instant, delivering a flying kick that sent the attacker sprawling. As the last of their opponents fell, Joseph and Vesta pressed on, the sounds of battle growing louder as they approached the council chamber. They burst through the doors to find Chancellor Martok cornered by members of the House of Dura. Without hesitation, they leapt into the fray. Joseph's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge a bat'leth strike aimed at Martok's head, while Vesta's powerful blow sent the attacker reeling. Back to back, the couple fought their way to Martok's side, turning the tide of the battle. With Joseph, Vesta, and Martok united, the conservative faction's coup attempt began to falter. As the fighting subsided, Joseph stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Enough," he shouted, his words echoing in the sudden quiet. "We stand at a crossroads. We can continue this cycle of violence and mistrust, or we can forge a new path, one that honors Klingon tradition while embracing the strength that comes from unity." As Joseph spoke, he became aware that their actions were being broadcast throughout the Klingon Empire. Billions of Klingons watched as human and Klingon stood side by side, defending the Empire's leadership. The impact was immediate and profound, swaying public opinion even among the more traditional elements of Klingon society. Chancellor Martok, his face bloodied but his eyes shining with approval, stepped forward. "The final trial of the Kal-Hasha will proceed," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "But it will be more than a test of Joseph and Vesta's union. It will be a public demonstration of human-Klingon cooperation, showcasing the potential strengths of our peoples united." As the chamber erupted in a mix of cheers and grumbling acceptance, Joseph and Vesta stood together, their hands clasped. They knew that the final trial would be their greatest challenge yet, a test that would determine not only their personal future, but the course of human-Klingon relations for generations to come. The eyes of two great powers were upon them as they prepared to face this ultimate challenge. The Federation and the Klingon Empire held their collective breath, aware that they were witnessing a potentially historic moment in interstellar relations. For Joseph and Vesta, however, the weight of this responsibility was balanced by their unwavering trust in each other and their shared vision of a united future. The eyes of two great powers were upon them as they prepared to face this ultimate challenge. The Federation and the Klingon Empire held their collective breath, aware that they were witnessing a potentially historic moment in interstellar relations. For Joseph and Vesta, however, the weight of this responsibility was balanced by their unwavering trust in each other and their shared vision of a united future. As they stepped into the vast arena, holographic projections shimmered into existence around them, transforming the space into a complex landscape of obstacles and challenges. The roar of the crowd faded, replaced by the hum of energy fields and the distant rumble of simulated natural disasters. Joseph felt a surge of adrenaline as he surveyed the scene before them. "Ready?" he asked, glancing at Vesta. She nodded, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Always." They moved forward in perfect synchronization, their earlier trials having forged them into a seamless unit. The first challenge materialized before them. a raging holographic wildfire threatening a simulated colony. Joseph's quick thinking complemented Vesta's strength as they worked to evacuate holographic civilians and contain the blaze. As they progressed through the trials, Dr. Talara watched intently from a monitoring station, her eyes darting between Joseph's vital signs and the rapidly changing data on her screens. "Fascinating," she murmured, noting the subtle shifts in his genetic structure. The challenges grew increasingly complex. In one scenario, they found themselves negotiating a delicate peace treaty between warring alien factions. Joseph's diplomatic skills shone as he navigated the complex political landscape, while Vesta's imposing presence and strategic insight kept their position strong. Billions of viewers across both the Federation and the Klingon Empire watched in awe as the human-Klingon pair overcame obstacle after obstacle. Among the audience, Admiral Janeway and her team worked feverishly, analyzing the incoming data on human-Klingon genetic compatibility. "These results are remarkable," one of Janeway's scientists reported. "The potential for controlled genetic mixing is far greater than we ever imagined." As the trial wore on, Joseph began to notice changes in his own body. His reactions became faster, his strength increased. During a particularly grueling physical challenge, he found himself keeping pace with Vesta's Klingon endurance. The final scenario erupted around them, a simulated Borg invasion. Holographic drones materialized, their cybernetic implants glinting in the artificial light. Joseph and Vesta moved as one, their movements a deadly dance of human agility and Klingon power. Joseph ducked under a Borg assimilation tubule, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to evade the attack with ease. He spun, delivering a powerful kick that sent the drone stumbling back. Beside him, Vesta's bat'leth flashed, severing the drone's connection to the collective. As they fought, Joseph felt a strange sensation coursing through his body. His muscles burned with newfound strength, his senses sharpened to an almost painful degree. He moved with inhuman speed, anticipating and countering the Borg attacks before they could fully materialize. The audience watched in stunned silence as Joseph's performance began to match, and in some cases exceed, Klingon norms. Even the most skeptical observers found themselves grudgingly impressed by the display of human potential. With a final coordinated assault, Joseph and Vesta deactivated the last of the Borg drones. As the holographic projections faded away, they stood victorious in the center of the arena. The crowd erupted in a deafening roar of approval. Chancellor Martok stepped forward, his voice booming across the arena. "The Kal-Haya is complete. Joseph and Vesta have proven themselves worthy, not just as a mated pair, but as warriors of the Empire." As the words left Martok's lips, Joseph felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. The world began to spin, the cheers of the crowd fading to a dull roar. He stumbled, reaching out for Vesta. "Joseph!" Vesta's voice seemed to come from far away as darkness crept into the edges of his vision. The last thing Joseph saw before losing consciousness was Vesta's concerned face and the rush of medical personnel converging on him. Then, blackness claimed him. Joseph awoke to the steady beep of medical equipment and the low hum of voices. He blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus. He was in a medical bay, surrounded by a mix of Klingon and Federation technology. Dr. Talara stood over him, her eyes wide with scientific curiosity as she studied the readouts on her tricorder. "Remarkable," she murmured. "The combination of the neural stimulator, the Kal-Haya trials, and your unique genetic structure has triggered an unprecedented adaptive response." Joseph tried to sit up, but a firm hand on his chest pushed him back down. He turned to see Vesta, her face a mask of concern and perseverance. "Rest, my mate," she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Your body is undergoing significant changes." Before Joseph could respond, the door to the medical bay slid open, revealing Chancellor Martok and Admiral Janeway. The tension in the room was palpable as they approached Joseph's bedside. Martok spoke first, his voice grave. "The High Council is in emergency session. The outcome of your transformation could shape the future of our peoples." Janeway nodded, adding, "We're on the brink of a new era of human-Klingon relations. But there are those who fear these changes, who see them as a threat to Klingon purity. As if to underscore her words, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. Angry voices could be heard, demanding access to the medical bay. Joseph recognized the guttural tones of the Duras faction, their words filled with vitriol and accusations of human weakness. Vesta's hand tightened on Joseph's, her eyes blazing with a mixture of love and fierce protectiveness. "Let them come," she growled. "My mate has proven himself a true warrior of the Empire. I will defend him with my life if necessary." Joseph felt a surge of strength at her words, despite the pain and disorientation of his ongoing transformation. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the shouting outside grew louder, Joseph steeled himself for the battles to come, both for his own survival and for the future of human-Klingon relations. The chaos outside the medical bay intensified as Joseph's consciousness faded in and out. Through the haze, he heard Dr. Talara's urgent voice. "His condition is critical. The genetic changes are putting severe stress on his organs. We need to stabilize him immediately." Joseph felt a warm pressure on his hand. Vesta's face swam into view, her features etched with worry and perseverance. "What can be done?" she demanded, her voice a low growl. Dr. Talara's fingers flew over her medical console. "We need to counteract the rapid changes. I propose a combination of Klingon blood transfusions and modified Lumari life force sharing techniques." Vesta's grip on Joseph's hand tightened. "Then use my blood. I will share my life force with my mate." Without hesitation, Vesta extended her arm as the medical team rushed to set up the transfusion equipment. Joseph watched through half-lidded eyes as a thin tube connected him to Vesta, her crimson Klingon blood flowing into his veins. The effect was almost immediate. A warmth spread through Joseph's body, chasing away the chill of shock. His heartbeat steadied, and the pain began to recede. As the transfusion continued, Joseph felt a deep connection to Vesta, as if their very essence was intertwining. Hours passed in a blur of medical activity. Joseph drifted in and out of consciousness, always aware of Vesta's presence at his side. Each time he opened his eyes, he noticed subtle changes in his own body. His arms seemed more muscular, his skin taking on a slightly rougher texture. Dr. Talara's voice cut through the fog. "Fascinating. His body is adapting to the Klingon DNA at an unprecedented rate. Look at the increase in muscle density and bone structure." Joseph tried to speak, but his voice came out as a rasp. Vesta leaned in close, her forehead touching his in an intimate Klingon gesture. "Rest, my warrior," she whispered. "Your battle now is to heal." As Joseph's condition stabilized, the world beyond the medical bay continued to churn with activity. Through snippets of conversation, he learned of the fierce debate raging in the High Council chambers over Chancellor Martok's proposal for a joint human-Klingon explorer corps. Admiral Janeway's voice drifted in from the corridor. "We're offering the use of our advanced medical technology. It's a gesture of goodwill that could help strengthen our alliance." Joseph's eyes fluttered open to see Dr. Talara bent over a console, her expression one of excitement and disbelief. "This is remarkable," she exclaimed. "The combination of human adaptability, Klingon strength, and the residual effects of the Lumari neural stimulator has resulted in enhanced regenerative abilities. His wounds from the Kal-Haya trials are healing at an incredible rate." Joseph flexed his fingers, feeling strength returning to his limbs. He turned his head to see Vesta, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and love. "How do you feel, my mate?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Joseph took a deep breath, marveling at the lack of pain. "Stronger," he replied, his voice steadier than before. "Different, but good." Dr. Talara approached, tricorder in hand. "Your body is adapting to its new hybrid state faster than we anticipated. The potential implications of this are extraordinary." As Joseph's recovery progressed, the atmosphere on Konos shifted. News of his improving condition spread rapidly, swaying opinions in the High Council and on the streets. Outside the medical facility, a group of young Klingons gathered, their voices raised in chants of support. "Joseph! Joseph! Hybrid Vanguard!" The energy of change was palpable, even within the confines of the medical bay. Joseph could feel it thrumming through his veins, intermingling with Vesta's blood and his own transforming DNA. Chancellor Martok's voice boomed through the comm systems, addressing the Empire. Joseph's condition improves, and with it, we witness the dawn of a new era for the Klingon people. This is not weakness, but a new frontier of strength and glory. As Joseph's strength returned, Dr. Talar and her team began preparations for his physical therapy. They designed a program that blended human and Klingon techniques, tailored to his unique physiology. "Are you ready to stand?" Dr. Talar asked, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. Joseph nodded, feeling a surge of anticipation. With Vesta's support, he swung his legs over the side of the bed. As his feet touched the floor, he marveled at the new sensations coursing through his body. Taking a deep breath, Joseph pushed himself upright. His movements were fluid and strong, each muscle responding with newfound power. Vesta stood beside him, her hand on his arm, but he found he didn't need the support. A cheer erupted from the corridor as Joseph took his first steps. He moved with a grace that surprised even himself, his body a perfect synthesis of human agility and Klingon strength. As he stood tall, Joseph met Vesta's gaze. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of their shared future, a future that held the promise of unity between their peoples and the potential for extraordinary discoveries. The door to the medical bay slid open, revealing a corridor packed with onlookers. Klingon warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with Federation officers, all eyes fixed on Joseph and Vesta. In that moment, they were more than individuals. They were a symbol of a new path forward, a bridge between two great powers. Joseph took another step, then another, Vesta moving in perfect sync beside him. As they approached the threshold of the medical bay, the cheers grew louder. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities beyond imagining. But as Joseph stood there, transformed yet still himself, he knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Together, united in purpose and strength. As Joseph's recovery progressed, Dr. Talara and her team designed a series of physical challenges to test the full extent of his newfound abilities. The medical bay transformed into a bustling hub of activity as technicians installed holographic projectors and biosensors throughout the room. "We've created a unique testing environment," Dr. Talara explained, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "It combines elements from both human and Klingon training grounds. This will allow us to push your hybrid physiology to its limits." Joseph nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He glanced at Vesta, who stood by his side, her posture radiating confidence. "Are you ready, my mate?" she asked, her voice low and encouraging. "As I'll ever be," Joseph replied, squaring his shoulders. The first challenge materialized around them, a holographic obstacle course that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Gravity shifted unpredictably, platforms appeared and disappeared, and holographic adversaries lunged from hidden alcoves. Joseph moved with a grace that surprised even himself. He leapt impossible distances, his enhanced muscles propelling him through the air with ease. His reflexes, sharper than ever before, allowed him to dodge attacks that would have felled even the most seasoned Klingon warrior. As he navigated the course, Joseph became acutely aware of the changes in his body. His senses were heightened to an almost painful degree, allowing him to perceive minute details in his environment. He could hear the subtle hum of the holographic emitters, feel the slight variations in air pressure as obstacles materialized around him. The observers watched in awe as Joseph completed the course in record time. Admiral Janeway leaned forward, her expression a mix of wonder and concern. "Remarkable," she murmured. "His performance far exceeds both human and Klingon norms." Chancellor Martok nodded, his single eye gleaming with satisfaction. "Indeed, it seems our gamble has paid off in ways we could not have imagined." The challenges continued, each designed to test a different aspect of Joseph's hybrid physiology. He lifted weights that would have strained even the strongest Klingon, his muscles bulging with newfound power. In agility tests, he moved with a fluid grace that seemed to merge human flexibility with Klingon raw strength. As the trials progressed, Vesta insisted on participating alongside Joseph. The medical team, after some deliberation, agreed to allow it under close supervision. The holographic environment shifted, transforming into a simulated battlefield. Joseph and Vesta stood back to back, facing waves of holographic opponents. As they fought, their movements became a seamless dance of strength and agility. Joseph's quick thinking complemented Vesta's raw power perfectly. He anticipated attacks, calling out warnings and opportunities that Vesta instantly acted upon. Their teamwork was flawless, each anticipating the other's moves as if they shared a single mind. The gathered observers watched in stunned silence as the pair dispatched opponent after opponent. General Korzak, a grizzled Klingon military leader, leaned forward, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "Extraordinary," he growled. "The humans' enhanced abilities, combined with traditional Klingon strength, the military applications are endless." Admiral Janeway frowned at this, her concerns evident in her voice. "We must be cautious. The focus should be on scientific and exploratory potential, not military advantage." As the final simulation faded away, Joseph and Vesta stood victorious in the center of the room. The air was thick with tension as the implications of what they had just witnessed sank in. Chancellor Martok stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber. "We have seen the future today, a future where the strengths of humans and Klingons are united. I call for a full demonstration of these abilities before the High Council and Federation dignitaries." The announcement sent a ripple of excitement and apprehension through the room. Joseph and Vesta exchanged glances, both understanding the weight of what was to come. In the days that followed, preparations for the demonstration consumed every waking moment. Joseph underwent further tests and training, pushing his new abilities to their limits. Vesta stood by his side, her unwavering support a constant source of strength. The day of the demonstration arrived with an air of electric anticipation. The Great Hall of Kronos was packed to capacity, with billions more watching via subspace transmission across both human and Klingon worlds. As Joseph and Vesta entered the hall, a hush fell over the crowd. They stood tall, their presence commanding attention from every corner of the vast chamber. Chancellor Martok's voice rang out, officially beginning the demonstration. Joseph moved to the center of the hall, where a series of weights had been arranged. With fluid grace, he began to lift, starting with weights that would challenge a Klingon warrior and progressing to loads that seemed impossibly heavy. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Joseph hefted a final weight that even Klingon legends would struggle with. As he set it down, a roar of approval erupted from the gathered Klingons. Next came the agility test. A holographic obstacle course sprang to life, filling the air with shimmering barriers and moving platforms. Joseph launched himself into motion, his body a blur as he navigated the course with inhuman speed and precision. As he completed the course in record time, even the most skeptical observers found themselves grudgingly impressed. Murmurs of excitement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by shouts of approval from the younger Klingons. The final test was the combat simulation. Joseph stood alone in the center of the hall as a team of Klingon warriors entered, their bat'leths gleaming in the light. The air grew tense with anticipation. At an unseen signal, the warriors attacked. Joseph moved with fluid grace, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to anticipate and counter each strike. He wove between his opponents, using their own strength against them. In a display of tactical brilliance, Joseph managed to disarm and subdue each warrior without causing serious injury. As the last opponent yielded, a stunned silence fell over the hall. Chancellor Martok stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "We have witnessed something extraordinary today, the birth of a new era of cooperation between our peoples. I hereby announce the formation of the Human Klingon Explorer Corps, with Joseph and Queen Vesta as its co-commanders." The announcement was met with a thunderous mix of cheers and murmurs. Joseph and Vesta stood side by side, acutely aware of the weight of history on their shoulders. As the demonstration concluded, Joseph and Vesta retreated to their private quarters, minds reeling from the day's events. They had barely begun to discuss the implications when an urgent communication from Chancellor Martok interrupted them. Commanders, Martok's gruff voice came through the comm system. We have a situation that requires the immediate attention of the Explorer Corps. Report to the command center at once. Joseph and Vesta exchanged glances, both excitement and apprehension clear in their eyes. Their first official mission as co-commanders of the Explorer Corps awaited, promising new challenges and adventures in the integration of human and Klingon cultures. As they made their way to the command center, the corridors of the Klingon stronghold buzzed with activity. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and Joseph and Vesta stood at its forefront, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Ahead, the doors to the command center slid open, revealing a hive of activity. Klingon officers and Federation personnel worked side by side, their focus intense as they pored over holographic displays and data streams. Chancellor Martok stood at the center of the room, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the floor. As Joseph and Vesta approached, he turned to face them, his single eye gleaming with a mix of urgency and excitement. Commanders, Martok's voice boomed, cutting through the din of the command center. We have a situation that requires the immediate attention of the Explorer Corps. Joseph felt a surge of adrenaline course through his newly enhanced body. What's the mission, Chancellor? Martok activated a large holographic display, revealing a planet with jagged mountain ranges and vast barren plains. This is Borth, a sacred world to our people and home to an ancient monastery. We've received a distress signal from the Klingon colony there. The hologram zoomed in, showcasing strange metallic structures sprouting from the ground near the monastery. Vesta leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the image. Those structures, they're not of Klingon design. Correct, Martok nodded. The colony reports geological disturbances and the sudden appearance of these unknown ruins. We believe they may be of ancient Klingon origin, predating even our oldest records. Joseph's mind raced with the possibilities. A perfect first mission for the Explorer Corps. Indeed, Martok agreed. You will lead an expedition to Borth. This mission will require both human ingenuity and Klingon strength. It's time to put your new abilities to the test, Joseph. As Martok outlined the mission parameters, the command center doors opened again. General Korzak strode in, followed closely by Admiral Janeway. The air in the room seemed to thicken with tension. Chancellor, Korzak's gravelly voice rang out. I insist on sending a contingent of Klingon warriors to accompany the expedition. Borth is sacred ground, and we cannot risk its desecration. Admiral Janeway stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. While I understand your concerns, General, we must maintain the exploratory nature of this mission. I propose sending a team of Federation scientists to assist in the investigation. Joseph and Vesta exchanged glances, recognizing the delicate political balance at play. Before either could speak, Martok raised a hand, silencing the room. We will do both, the Chancellor declared. A mixed team of Klingon warriors, Federation scientists, and volunteers from the hybrid vanguard will accompany the commanders. This mission will showcase the strength of our newfound cooperation. With the decision made, preparations began in earnest. Joseph and Vesta found themselves aboard the IKS Unity, a newly commissioned hybrid vessel that merged Klingon and Federation technology. As they broke orbit around Kronos, Joseph marveled at the ship's seamless blend of robust Klingon engineering and sleek Federation design. During the journey to Borth, Joseph and Vesta worked tirelessly to integrate their diverse crew. They organized joint training exercises, challenging the team to combine human and Klingon approaches to problem-solving and combat. In one such exercise, Joseph stood before a holographic simulation of a treacherous mountain pass. The objective is simple, he announced to the mixed team. Reach the other side as quickly as possible while avoiding the falling rocks and unstable terrain. The Klingon warriors immediately charged forward, their strength and endurance allowing them to power through obstacles. The Federation scientists hung back, analyzing the patterns of the falling rocks and plotting the safest route. Joseph smiled, then launched into action. He used his enhanced agility to leap between safe zones, calling out patterns to the Klingons ahead and relaying safe paths back to the scientists. Vesta coordinated from the rear, ensuring no one was left behind. As the last team member crossed the finish line, Joseph deactivated the simulation. Well done, everyone. This is exactly the kind of teamwork we'll need on Borth. The Unity dropped out of warp in orbit around Borth, and the crew gathered on the bridge to survey their destination. The planet's surface was a tapestry of rugged mountains and sprawling deserts, with the ancient monastery standing as a lone bastion of civilization. But it was the areas surrounding the monastery that drew everyone's attention. Where there had once been barren rock, strange metallic structures now jutted from the ground, their surfaces gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. Sensors are having difficulty penetrating those structures, a Federation science officer reported. There's some kind of energy field interfering with our scans. Joseph nodded, feeling a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull. Looks like we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way. Prepare a landing party. As the away team materialized on the planet's surface, the true scale of the structures became apparent. They towered overhead, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Joseph led the way, his enhanced senses alert for any sign of danger. As they approached the largest of the structures, he felt an inexplicable pull. Reaching out, he placed his hand on the metallic surface. Instantly, his mind was flooded with vivid images. Ancient Klingon warriors locked in epic battles, vast fleets of starships unlike anything in modern records, and at the center of it all, a figure that radiated power and authority. Joseph gasped and stumbled back, his palms sweating from the vision. Vesta was at his side in an instant, steadying him. "What did you see?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Before Joseph could answer, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The expedition team watched in awe as new metallic growths burst from the earth, reaching toward the sky like the fingers of some colossal buried giant. It's not just ruins, Joseph realized, his voice filled with wonder and a hint of trepidation. It's alive, and it's growing. As the team scrambled to understand this new development, Joseph knew that their mission had just become far more complex than anyone could have anticipated. The secrets buried beneath Borth's surface were awakening, and with them, the potential to reshape the future of both the Klingon Empire and the Federation. With a shared look of persistence, Joseph and Vesta began organizing their team to face this unprecedented challenge. The true test of the human Klingon Explorer Corps had only just begun. As the team worked to unravel the mysteries of the living structures on Borth, Joseph couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning of a much larger discovery. Weeks passed in a blur of intense research and careful exploration. The joint human-Klingon team made significant progress in understanding the nature of the artifacts, but with each answer came a dozen new questions. As the expedition drew to a close, Joseph and Vesta knew their findings would have far-reaching implications for both their peoples. The journey back to Kronos was filled with anticipation and a touch of apprehension. As the IKS Unity dropped out of warp and entered orbit around the Klingon homeworld, Joseph and Vesta exchanged a meaningful glance. They knew the reception awaiting them would be unlike anything they had experienced before. No sooner had they materialized on the planet's surface than they were whisked away by a contingent of Klingon guards. The streets of the capital were abuzz with activity, and Joseph caught glimpses of both curious onlookers and stern-faced warriors as they were escorted through the city. Their destination was a high-security facility on the outskirts of the capital. As they approached, Joseph noted the blend of Klingon and Federation architecture, a physical representation of the alliance they were forging. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with advanced technology. Chancellor Martok's imposing figure stood at the center of the room, flanked by Admiral Janeway and several key members of both Klingon and Federation leadership. The atmosphere was charged with tension and excitement. "Commanders," Martok's gruff voice echoed through the chamber, "we are eager to hear your report." Joseph stepped forward, his enhanced senses taking in every detail of the room. He noticed the subtle shift in posture among the Klingon leaders, a mix of respect and wariness. As he began to recount their experiences on Borth, the chamber came to life around them. Advanced holographic technology recreated the metallic structures they had encountered, filling the air with shimmering images. Joseph's words painted a vivid picture of their discoveries, but it was when he described his interaction with the artifact that the room truly came alive with murmurs and exclamations. As Joseph placed his hand on the holographic representation of the structure, mimicking his actions on Borth, the image pulsed and shifted. The assembled leaders watched in awe as the hologram responded to his touch, revealing intricate patterns and glyphs that had been invisible before. Incredible, Admiral Janeway breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Vesta stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. Joseph's unique physiology appears to have a resonance with the artifact, she explained. It's as if the structures recognize him as both human and Klingon. Dr. Talara, who had been observing silently, moved to a nearby console. With a few quick taps, she brought up a detailed genetic map on the main display. I've been analyzing Commander Joseph's genetic structure since our return, she announced. The hybridization process has stabilized, creating a perfect balance between human and Klingon DNA. The revelation sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Joseph could see the wheels turning in the minds of the assembled leaders, calculating the potential implications of this development. Chancellor Martok's voice cut through the murmurs. This discovery could change everything, he declared. I propose we establish a new research facility on Borth, jointly operated by the Human Klingon Explorer Corps and our medical institutes. We must understand the full potential of these artifacts and explore the possibilities of controlled hybridization. As the leaders debated the logistics of this new endeavor, Joseph and Vesta found themselves at the center of a growing storm. News of their return and the discoveries on Borth had spread like wildfire through the capital. Outside the facility, crowds had begun to gather, their voices rising in a mix of chants and songs. General Martok, his face a mask of almost unchecked disdain, approached Joseph. The people may see you as some sort of messiah, he growled, but I say you have yet to prove your worth as a leader of Klingons. His eyes narrowed as he issued his challenge. I demand you undergo the second rite of ascension. Prove your mettle in the crucible of Klingon tradition. A hush fell over the chamber as all eyes turned to Joseph. The second rite was notorious for its brutality, a test that had broken many full-blooded Klingon warriors. To refuse would be seen as weakness, but to accept could put his unique physiology at risk. Before Joseph could respond, Vesta stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. If Joseph is to undergo the rite, then so shall I. We face this challenge as one, a symbol of the unity between our peoples. The declaration sent shockwaves through the assembled leaders. Never before had a Klingon leader shared the rite with a mate, let alone one of mixed heritage. Joseph felt a surge of pride and affection for Vesta, mixed with a touch of concern for the ordeal that lay ahead. Chancellor Martok, recognizing the historical significance of the moment, raised his hand for silence. So be it, he declared. Let preparations for the second rite of ascension begin immediately. May it serve as a testament to the strength of our new alliance. As the chamber erupted into a flurry of activity, Joseph and Vesta stood side by side, their hands clasped tightly together. They knew that the coming days would test them in ways they had never imagined, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their vision for a shared future. The news of their impending trial spread rapidly through the capital, igniting a fervor among both supporters and detractors. As Joseph and Vesta were led from the facility to begin their preparations, they could hear the roar of the crowds outside, a cacophony of voices that would only grow louder in the days to come. Come. As Joseph and Vesta were escorted to their quarters to rest and prepare, the city buzzed with anticipation for the impending second rite of ascension. The night passed quickly, and before they knew it, Joseph and Vesta found themselves emerging from the cleansing chamber as the first light of dawn broke over Konos. Their bodies, adorned with intricate Klingon markings, glistened in the dim light of the great hall. The vast chamber was already filled to capacity, with spectators from both the Federation and Klingon Empire eager to witness this unprecedented event. Chancellor Martok stood at the forefront, his presence commanding respect from all in attendance. Beside him, Admiral Janeway's eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and concern. General Mortok took his position as overseer of the ritual, his face set in a mask of stern disapproval. Joseph and Vesta exchanged a final glance before taking their places in the center of the hall, standing back to back. A circle of Klingon warriors wielding pain sticks formed around them, their faces impassive as they prepared to carry out their duty. The first warrior stepped forward, pain stick raised. Joseph steeled himself, muscles tensing in anticipation. The moment the stick made contact, a wave of agony coursed through his body. His hybrid physiology seemed to amplify the pain, every nerve ending screaming in protest. Yet he refused to cry out, clenching his jaw so tightly he thought his teeth might shatter. Beside him, Vesta endured her own shock simultaneously. Their bond, both emotional and physical, allowed them to share the burden of the pain. As the ritual progressed, hour after excruciating hour, Joseph found himself drawing strength from Vesta's unwavering commitment, just as she drew from his. The spectators watched in awe as the couple displayed unprecedented endurance. Dr. Talara, monitoring their vital signs, marveled at the way Joseph's hybrid physiology adapted to the stress, constantly shifting to better withstand the onslaught. As the pain reached new heights, Joseph's mind began to fracture, giving way to vivid visions similar to those he had experienced on Borth. The Great Hall's holographic systems projected these images for all to see, glimpses of Kahless and other legendary Klingon figures, their forms shimmering in the air above the ritual circle. The visions caused a stir among the Klingon elders present, their murmurs of astonishment barely audible over the crackling of the pain sticks. Joseph barely registered their reactions, lost in a world of pain and ancient memories not his own. Halfway through the rite, General Mortok's frustration at Joseph and Vesta's resilience boiled over. "Increase the intensity," he barked, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere of the hall. Chancellor Mortok's head snapped toward Mortok. "That goes beyond tradition," he growled, but Mortok was already invoking ancient laws that gave him authority over the ritual. The warriors complied, and the next application of the pain sticks sent Joseph and Vesta to their knees. Their bodies trembled violently, muscles spasming under the increased assault. Yet still, they did not break. As the final hour approached, Joseph's visions intensified. The holographic displays filled with scenes of a united future, humans and Klingons working side by side, exploring the stars together. The images seemed to pulse in time with the waves of pain racking his body. In those climactic moments, Joseph felt a strange sensation sweep through him. His skin began to tingle, then burn. He heard Vesta gasp beside him and knew she was experiencing the same thing. Before the eyes of the astonished spectators, their appearances began to shift. Joseph's skin took on a more pronounced Klingon texture, ridges deepening across his forehead. He could feel new strength flooding his muscles, even as the pain threatened to overwhelm him. Vesta underwent her own transformation, her human traits becoming more pronounced, creating a perfect blend of both species. As the final pain stick was applied, Joseph felt something deep within him snap. A roar tore from his throat, echoed perfectly by Vesta. The sound reverberated through the Great Hall, a harmony of human and Klingon vocals that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The pain sticks were withdrawn, and Joseph and Vesta stood tall, their transformations complete. The hall fell silent, all eyes fixed on the pair who now embodied the perfect union of human and Klingon. Chancellor Mortok stepped forward, his voice filled with awe and respect. "Joseph and Vesta, you have passed the second rite of ascension. Your strength and unity honor us all." As Mortok presented them with ceremonial Klingon armor, the crowd erupted in cheers. Even some of the more conservative Klingons nodded grudgingly, unable to deny the incredible feat they had just witnessed. In the aftermath of the rite, medical teams swarmed around Joseph and Vesta. Dr. Tilara's preliminary scans revealed astounding changes in their hybrid physiologies. "The stress of the ritual has stabilized their condition," she announced, her usually stoic voice tinged with excitement. "This could solve the issue of long-term hybrid viability." As the implications of this discovery began to sink in, General Mortok stormed out of the Great Hall, his supporters already beginning to distance themselves. The political landscape of the empire was shifting before their very eyes. Chancellor Martok, seizing the historic moment, stepped forward once more. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," he declared. "I hereby announce the immediate commencement of the Borth research project with Joseph and Vesta as its joint leaders." As the crowd's cheers grew louder, Joseph and Vesta clasped hands, their newly transformed bodies humming with shared sensation. They knew that their journey was just the beginning. In fact, it was only just beginning. The mysteries of Borth awaited them, along with the challenge of navigating their enhanced connection and the growing movement that saw them as the heralds of a new age. With determined steps, they made their way towards the ship that would take them to Borth, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. As their ship approached Borth, Joseph and Vesta stood side by side on the bridge, their newly transformed bodies still humming with shared sensation. The planet loomed large in the view screen, its surface a tapestry of ancient ruins and sprawling research facilities. Suddenly, the communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission. "Chancellor Martok," the officer announced, surprise evident in his voice. Joseph nodded, and the stern face of the Klingon leader filled the screen. "Joseph, Vesta," Martok growled, his expression grave. "We have a situation." The Chancellor quickly briefed them on the escalating unrest in the outlying Klingon colonies. Joseph felt a chill run down his spine as Martok explained how several colonies had declared their allegiance to him and Vesta, viewing them as messianic figures. "This is unexpected," Vesta said, her voice steady despite the shock. As they entered Borth's atmosphere, the true scale of the situation became apparent. The landing pad was surrounded by a sea of people, their voices rising in a cacophony of chants and songs. "By Kales," Joseph breathed, his enhanced vision picking out details in the crowd. "There must be thousands of them." The ship touched down, and security forces immediately moved to form a protective cordon. As the airlock hissed open, the roar of the crowd intensified. Joseph and Vesta stepped out, their newly transformed appearances eliciting gasps of awe from the assembled pilgrims. Hands reached out, trying to touch them, to make contact with what they believed to be living incarnations of Klingon prophecy. Joseph felt the press of bodies, the fervent energy of the crowd threatening to overwhelm them. "Stay close," he murmured to Vesta, taking her hand as they pushed through the throng. Security personnel struggled to maintain order, their shouts barely audible over the din. Joseph could sense the situation teetering on the edge of chaos. Using his enhanced strength, he gently but firmly moved people aside, creating a path towards the research facility. Inside, the relative quiet was almost shocking. Dr. Talara greeted them, her Vulcan calm a stark contrast to the frenzy outside. "We must begin the tests immediately," she said, leading them to a state-of-the-art medical bay. As Talara's team conducted their scans, Joseph and Vesta exchanged worried glances. The doctor's eyebrows rose higher with each new reading. "Fascinating," Talara murmured, studying a holographic display of their bioreadings. "Your physiologies have continued to evolve. Your strength, stamina, and sensory perception have all increased dramatically." She manipulated the display, zooming in on a particular area. "Most intriguing is this bioelectric field surrounding you both. It appears to be resonating at a frequency similar to the ancient artifact." Before they could discuss the implications, an aide burst into the room. "The crowd outside is growing restless," he reported breathlessly. "Security is requesting reinforcements." Joseph could hear the commotion even through the facility's thick walls. He turned to Vesta, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. "We need to address them," he said. "Show them we're not some mythical figures, but people working for the betterment of both our races." Vesta nodded, her expression resolute. "Agreed, but we must be careful not to encourage this fervor." As they made their way to the facility's main entrance, Joseph's enhanced hearing picked up snatches of conversation from the security teams. He heard mentions of pilgrim camps springing up across Borth, of ships arriving hourly with more seekers. The doors slid open, revealing a roiling mass of humanity and Klingons. A hush fell over the crowd as Joseph and Vesta stepped forward, their hybrid features clearly visible in the harsh Borth sunlight. Joseph raised his hands, calling for silence. "We understand your excitement," he began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled throng. "But we are not gods or prophets. We are scientists, explorers, seeking to understand the gifts given to us by circumstance and choice." Vesta stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. "We ask for your patience and understanding. The work we do here is delicate and complex. We cannot allow disruptions, no matter how well-intentioned." As they spoke, Joseph became aware of a strange sensation. The bioelectric field Talara had mentioned seemed to be intensifying, responding to the emotional energy of the crowd. He could feel it pulsing in time with his heartbeat, see it shimmering faintly in the air around them. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nodded in understanding, while others pressed forward, desperate to make physical contact with the hybrid couple. Security forces strained to hold the line. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. Joseph's enhanced vision zoomed in on the disturbance. A group of Klingons, their faces set in scowls of disapproval, were pushing their way through the throng. "Blasphemers!" one of them shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "You bring corruption to the pure Klingon bloodline." Joseph recognized the speaker, one of General Mortok's aides. He tensed, sensing the delicate situation was about to take a dangerous turn. Before he could respond, the facility's alarms began to blare. Dr. Talara's voice came over the comm system, urgent and uncharacteristically emotional. "Joseph, Vesta, we need you in the artifact chamber immediately. Something is happening." As they turned to re-enter the facility, Joseph caught a glimpse of the ancient Klingon artifact through a window. It was glowing, pulsing with an otherworldly light that seemed to call to him on a cellular level. The crowd surged forward, security barely able to contain them. Joseph and Vesta broke into a run, their enhanced physiology allowing them to move with inhuman speed. As they raced towards the artifact chamber, Joseph could feel the bioelectric field around them growing stronger, resonating with the energy emanating from the ancient relic. They burst into the chamber, greeted by the sight of the artifact hovering above its pedestal, bathed in crackling energy. Dr. Talara and her team worked frantically at control panels, trying to contain the power surge. Wait, what's happening?" Vesta demanded, her voice barely audible over the rising hum of energy. Talara looked up, her face pale. "The artifact is reacting to your presence. Its energy output is increasing exponentially. If we can't stabilize it..." Her words were cut off as a bolt of energy arced from the artifact, striking Joseph and Vesta simultaneously. They cried out in unison, their bodies lifting off the ground as the energy engulfed them. Joseph felt his consciousness expanding, merging with Vesta's. Visions flashed before his eyes. Glimpses of ancient Klingon history, possible futures where humans and Klingons stood united. Through it all, he could feel the artifact's power coursing through him, changing him in ways he couldn't comprehend. As the energy cocoon surrounding them intensified, Joseph became dimly aware of chaos erupting both inside and outside the facility. The last thing he saw before the visions consumed him entirely was Dr. Talara's face, etched with a mixture of awe and terror. In that moment, suspended between past and future, human and Klingon, Joseph realized that everything was about to change. The fate of two great powers now hung in the balance, with him and Vesta at the center of the storm. The energy cocoons surrounding Joseph and Vesta pulsed with blinding intensity, their merged consciousness adrift in a sea of visions and sensations. Time seemed to lose all meaning as they floated, suspended between realities. Suddenly, a ripple of disruption cut through the swirling energy. Joseph felt a tug, as if an unseen force was trying to pull him back. He reached out, grasping Vesta's essence, unwilling to let go. "We're losing them!" Dr. Talara's voice pierced through the haze, sounding distant yet urgent. "Increase power to the containment field." A surge of opposing energy crashed against the cocoon, creating fissures in its surface. Joseph and Vesta's shared consciousness began to fracture, individual thoughts and memories reasserting themselves. With a final violent pulse, the energy cocoon shattered. Joseph and Vesta fell to the floor of the artifact chamber, gasping for air. The artifact, now dim and inert, settled back onto its pedestal. Dr. Talara rushed forward, medical tricorder in hand. "Vital signs stabilizing," she reported, her voice tight with almost unchecked excitement. "Incredible. Their hybrid physiology has fully integrated." Joseph blinked, his enhanced vision adjusting to the relative dimness of the chamber. He felt different, stronger, more aware. Every sound, every scent seemed amplified. He turned to Vesta, seeing his own mixture of confusion and wonder mirrored in her eyes. "What happened?" Vesta asked, her voice hoarse. Before Talara could answer, the facility shook with a distant explosion. Alarms blared, and the comm system crackled to life. "Security breach in sectors 3 and 4, a panicked voice announced. "General Mortok's forces have seized the weapons depot." Joseph and Vesta exchanged a look of steadfast perseverance. They rose to their feet with fluid grace, their movements perfectly in sync. "Doctor," Joseph said, turning to Talara, "we need to know exactly what's changed about us." Talara nodded, leading them to a nearby medical station. As she conducted her scans, Joseph and Vesta listened to the reports flooding in. Mortok had launched a full-scale coup attempt, taking advantage of the chaos caused by the artifact's activation. "Fascinating," Talara murmured, studying the results. "Your strength and reflexes have increased exponentially. Your sensory perception is off the charts. And there's something else." She manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on a particular readout. "You appear to have developed a unique neural interface capability. In theory, this could allow you to control Klingon technology with your minds." Another explosion rocked the facility. Joseph clenched his fists, feeling the raw power coursing through his veins. "We need to stop Mortok," he said, meeting Vesta's gaze. She nodded, a fierce light in her eyes. The door to the medical bay slid open, revealing Chancellor Martok flanked by a squad of his most trusted warriors. "The situation is dire," he growled. "Mortok's forces have taken control of key installations across Borth. We must act now to prevent this insurrection from spreading." Joseph stepped forward, his posture radiating confidence. "Chancellor, with our new abilities, Vesta and I can lead a strike team to retake the captured facilities." Martok studied them for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Very well. I'll assemble our best warriors to accompany you." As they made their way to the armory, Joseph and Vesta found themselves instinctively moving in perfect harmony. Their enhanced senses allowed them to perceive their surroundings with unprecedented clarity, every detail crystal clear. In the armory, they donned newly designed battle armor, a seamless blend of Federation and Klingon technology. As Joseph picked up a disruptor rifle, he felt a strange tingling sensation. Concentrating, he found he could interface directly with the weapon systems, fine-tuning its output with a mere thought. "Are you feeling this?" he asked Vesta, who nodded in amazement. "It's like the weapons are extensions of our bodies," she replied, expertly twirling a batleth. With their strike team assembled, Joseph and Vesta led the charge into Borth's transformed landscape. Ancient Klingon structures, dormant for millennia, had surged to life, creating a maze of activated technology and pulsing energy fields. As they approached the captured weapons depot, Joseph held up a hand, signaling the team to halt. His enhanced hearing picked up the sound of Mortok's forces patrolling the perimeter. "There," he whispered, pointing to a barely visible weak point in the depot's defenses. "We can breach through that section." Vesta nodded, already formulating a plan. "If we can get inside, we might be able to use our neural interface to turn their own weapons against them." Moving with preternatural stealth, the strike team infiltrated the weapons depot. Joseph and Vesta led the way, their hybrid senses allowing them to navigate the facility's complex layout with ease. As they entered the main storage area, alarms blared. Mortok's forces swarmed in, disruptors blazing. Joseph and Vesta sprang into action, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Joseph focused his mind, reaching out to the depot's defense systems. To his amazement, the security turrets swiveled, targeting Mortok's men instead of the strike team. Vesta, meanwhile, had engaged a group of Klingon warriors in close combat. Her batleth sang through the air, her enhanced strength and reflexes making her nearly unstoppable. As the battle raged, Joseph caught sight of General Mortok himself, barking orders from a command platform. With a thought, Joseph overrode the platform's controls, causing it to lower to ground level. Mortok roared in fury, drawing his own weapon. "Abominations," he spat. "You disgrace the Empire with your very existence." Joseph and Vesta advanced on the general, moving in perfect unison. "The Empire is changing, Mortok," Joseph said, his voice steady. "You can either change with it or be left behind." Mortok lunged forward, his disruptor firing wildly. Joseph and Vesta dodged with inhuman speed, closing the distance. In a flurry of strikes too fast for the eye to follow, they disarmed the general, forcing him to his knees. As Mortok's loyalists secured the weapons depot, Joseph and Vesta stood over the defeated Mortok. The general glared up at them, defiance still burning in his eyes. "This isn't over," Mortok growled. "The true Klingons will never accept your kind." Joseph and Vesta exchanged a look, their connection allowing them to communicate without words. They knew that while this battle was won, the struggle for the future of the Klingon Empire was far from finished. As they led the captured Mortok out of the depot, reports began flooding in from across Klingon space. The technological awakening had triggered similar uprisings on other worlds, plunging the Empire into chaos. Chancellor Martok's voice crackled over the comm system. "Joseph, Vesta, we've regained control of the communications array. I need you here immediately. We must address the Empire and put an end to this madness." With a shared nod of persistence, Joseph and Vesta set off towards the communications center, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their new roles as leaders of a changing Klingon society. Empire. Joseph and Vesta's enhanced senses were on high alert as they made their way to the communications center, acutely aware of the weight of responsibility resting on their shoulders. As they entered the sprawling command hub, Chancellor Martok turned to greet them, his weathered face etched with concern. "The Empire stands at a crossroad," he growled, gesturing to the array of holographic displays surrounding them. Each screen showed a different Klingon world in turmoil, ancient technology awakening and causing chaos. "We must act swiftly," Vesta said, her eyes scanning the tactical readouts. "A united front is crucial." Joseph nodded, stepping up to the central communications array. "We'll address the Empire together, Chancellor. Show them that humans and Klingons can work as one." As Martok prepared the broadcast, Joseph and Vesta shared a silent moment of understanding. Their hybrid physiology hummed with energy, a constant reminder of the changes they had undergone and the challenges that lay ahead. The communication went out across a Klingon space, Joseph and Vesta's words carrying the weight of their unique position. They spoke of unity, of embracing change while honoring tradition, and of the strength that comes from diversity. As they finished, a tense silence filled the air. Slowly, reports began to trickle in. On some worlds, the message was met with acceptance, even enthusiasm. On others, resistance remained strong. It was clear that their work was not nearly finished. "We need to do more than just talk," Joseph said, turning to Martok. "We need to show the Empire the benefits of cooperation firsthand." Martok nodded gravely. "Agreed. I propose a tour of our key worlds, starting with Tiga Cor. It's a vital military stronghold, and winning their support could turn the tide in our favor." As preparations for their journey began, Dr. Talara approached with her latest findings. "Your hybridization continues to stabilize," she reported, her voice tinged with excitement. "I believe we may see further developments in your abilities as time progresses." The journey to Tiga Cor was tense, filled with strategy sessions and continued reports of unrest throughout the Empire. As their ship entered orbit, Joseph and Vesta stood on the bridge, taking in the sight of the fortress world below. "Incoming transmission from the surface," the communications officer announced. "It's Governor Koth." The grizzled face of the planet's leader appeared on the monitor, his expression grim. "Joseph, Vesta," he growled, "we have a situation. An ancient weapons platform has emerged from beneath the planet's crust. My forces are struggling to contain the panic." Joseph and Vesta exchanged a look of commitment. "We're on our way, Governor," Vesta replied. "Prepare a landing site near the platform." As their shuttle descended through Tiga Cor's atmosphere, Joseph could feel a strange resonance building within him. He turned to Vesta, seeing the same recognition in her eyes. "The platform," he said. "We can sense it." Their landing was met with a mix of awe and suspicion from the gathered Klingon warriors. Governor Koth strode forward, his scarred face a mask of almost unchecked frustration. "This way," he grunted, leading them toward a massive structure that seemed to pulse with ancient power. As they approached, Joseph and Vesta felt the resonance grow stronger. Without conscious thought, they reached out, their minds interfacing with the platform's systems. Information flooded their consciousness: schematics, power readouts, weapons capabilities. "Incredible," Joseph breathed, his eyes unfocused as he processed the data. "This platform could defend the entire sector, but its power source is highly unstable." Vesta nodded, already moving toward the platform's entrance. "We need to stabilize it before it detonates. Joseph, work with the science team. I'll secure the perimeter." As Joseph delved into the complexities of the ancient power core, Vesta's enhanced senses picked up movement at the edge of the gathered crowd. A group of Klingon warriors, their eyes blazing with zealotry, pushed their way forward. "Blasphemers," their leader roared, brandishing a batleth. "You desecrate our sacred technology with your impure blood." Vesta moved with preternatural speed, placing herself between the advancing warriors and the platform. "Stand down," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of her royal lineage. The leader hesitated for a moment, then charged forward with a battle cry. Vesta met his attack with fluid grace, her hybrid strength allowing her to parry the batleth with ease. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she disarmed the warrior with a series of lightning-fast strikes, leaving him kneeling before her. Inside the platform, Joseph worked feverishly with the science team, his mind interfaced directly with the ancient systems. "We need to realign the power matrix," he called out, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "If we can distribute the load evenly, it should stabilize the core." As the power levels began to normalize, a cheer went up from the gathered Klingons outside. Vesta had single-handedly subdued the rogue warriors, her display of combat prowess winning over even the most skeptical observers. Joseph emerged from the platform, sweat beading on his brow. He locked eyes with Vesta, a silent message passing between them. Their success here was just the beginning. Governor Koth approached, his expression a mix of respect and lingering wariness. "You have done a great service to Tiga Cor," he said gruffly. "Perhaps there is merit in this. Cooperation, after all." Before Joseph could respond, their communicators chirped urgently. Chancellor Martok's voice came through, tight with concern. "Joseph, Vesta, we have a situation on Rurapenthi. A group of extremists from the hybrid vanguard have taken control of a genetic research facility. They're threatening to release a mutagenic virus if their demands aren't met." Joseph's heart raced as he processed the implications. "We're on our way, Chancellor," he replied, already moving toward their shuttle. "Send us all available data on the situation." As they prepared for emergency departure, Joseph and Vesta shared a look of relentless drive. The challenges facing them were escalating rapidly, testing the limits of their new abilities and the fragile alliance they represented. The future of the Empire hung in the balance, and they were the linchpin holding it all together. The shuttle lifted off from Tiga Cor's surface, leaving behind a world forever changed by their brief visit. As they set course for Rurapenthi, Joseph and Vesta knew that each new crisis would push them further, forcing them to evolve not just physically, but as leaders and symbols of a new era for both humans and Klingons. The journey to Rurapenthi was tense, with Joseph and Vesta poring over the data Martok had sent. As their ship dropped out of warp, the frozen wasteland of the penal asteroid loomed before them. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the research facility," Joseph said, his enhanced senses interfacing with the ship's systems. "Whatever these extremists have planned, it's already in motion." Vesta nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. "We'll need to move fast. If that virus is released, the consequences could be catastrophic." Their shuttle touched down near the facility, the icy winds howling around them as they disembarked. Joseph and Vesta moved with practiced efficiency, their hybrid physiologies allowing them to navigate the harsh terrain with ease. As they approached the research center, alarms blared. The extremists had detected their arrival. Joseph reached out with his mind, interfacing with the facility's security systems. "I've got control of the internal sensors," he reported. 15 hostiles, concentrated in the main lab. They've got hostages. Vesta unsheathed her batleth, the weapon humming with energy. "Let's end this quickly." They breached the facility's outer defenses, moving through the corridors with preternatural speed. When they encountered resistance, Joseph and Vesta worked in perfect tandem, their enhanced abilities allowing them to subdue the extremists without casualties. As they neared the main lab, Joseph's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of panicked voices. "They're preparing to release the virus," he warned. Vesta's eyes flashed with commitment. "Not if we have anything to say about it." They burst into the lab, Joseph immediately interfacing with the containment systems, while Vesta engaged the extremist leader in combat. The clash of batleth against batleth echoed through the room as Joseph worked feverishly to prevent the virus's release. With a final, decisive strike, Vesta disarmed the leader. Joseph's mind raced through the facility's systems, locking down the viral samples and neutralizing the threat. As Federation and Klingon security forces arrived to take control of the situation, Joseph and Vesta shared a moment of relief. They had averted a crisis, but both knew that their work was far from finished. Days later, as they prepared to depart Rurapenthe, a communique from Chancellor Martok arrived. "Your presence is required on Kuvat," the Chancellor's gruff voice announced. "Dr. Antak has made a breakthrough in hybridization technology. This could change everything." The journey to Kuvat was filled with anticipation. As their ship entered orbit, Joseph and Vesta marveled at the planet's sprawling medical complexes, visible even from space. Upon landing, they were greeted by Dr. Antak, a Klingon geneticist whose reputation preceded him. "Joseph, Queen Vesta," he said, bowing slightly, "your arrival is most fortuitous. We stand on the brink of a revolution in hybridization technology." As they toured the facility, Antak explained his team's latest breakthrough. "We've developed a procedure that could allow for controlled, stable hybridization in adult subjects," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "If successful, it could radically accelerate the integration of human and Klingon societies." Joseph and Vesta exchanged glances, both intrigued and cautious. "We'd like to oversee the trials personally," Joseph said. "This technology could be a game changer, but we need to ensure it's implemented responsibly." As preparations for the trials began, Joseph's communicator chirped urgently. Admiral Janeway's face appeared on the small screen, her expression grave. "Joseph, we've uncovered intel suggesting that General Mortok is planning to sabotage the research on Kuvat," she reported. "He believes discrediting the hybridization program will turn public opinion against you and Vesta." Joseph's heart made. "Understood, Admiral. We'll increase security and conduct a thorough sweep of the facility." Working with local security forces, Joseph and Vesta implemented enhanced protective measures around the research complex. They personally inspected each lab and testing area, using their hybrid abilities to interface with and upgrade the security systems. During one such inspection, Joseph's enhanced senses detected an anomaly. "There," he said, pointing to an innocuous-looking piece of equipment, "a hidden transmitter. Mortok's people have already infiltrated the facility." As the first round of hybridization trials approached, Dr. Antak approached Joseph and Vesta with a proposal. "Your hybrid physiologies are uniquely suited to undergo additional procedures," he explained. "It could further enhance your abilities and provide invaluable data for our research." After careful consideration, Joseph and Vesta agreed. As they were prepared for the procedure, Joseph couldn't shake a feeling of unease. "Be ready for anything," he murmured to Vesta. "Mortok won't pass up an opportunity like this." The procedure began, and Joseph felt his body changing, his connection to Klingon technology deepening. Beside him, Vesta's vital signs indicated similar transformations, but suddenly alarms began to blare. Joseph's vision blurred, his hybrid physiology destabilizing. Through the haze of pain, he heard Dr. Antek's panicked voice. "He's having a severe allergic reaction to one of the compounds." As Joseph slipped into unconsciousness, He felt Vesta's presence in his mind, stronger than ever before. She had established a direct neural link, using their shared bioelectric field to stabilize his condition. Joseph's eyes snapped open, his system gradually returning to balance. But before he could fully recover, the facility rocked with explosions. Mortok's assault had begun. Joseph and Vesta sprang into action, their newly enhanced abilities surging through them. They moved through the chaos of the attacked facility, neutralizing Mortok's forces with unprecedented efficiency. As they fought, Joseph discovered he could now override and control the weapons and equipment used by Mortok's team. With a thought, he disabled their disruptors and sealed off escape routes. Vesta, her strength increased exponentially, engaged Mortok himself in ferocious hand-to-hand combat. The general's bat'leth sang through the air, but Vesta's enhanced reflexes allowed her to anticipate and counter every strike. With a final decisive move, Vesta disarmed Mortok, forcing him to his knees. "It's over, General," she said, her voice steady despite the intensity of the battle. As security forces secured Mortok and his captured loyalists, Joseph's enhanced senses detected another threat. "Explosives," he said, his mind already reaching out to interface with the devices. Mortok planted them throughout the complex. Working quickly, Joseph located and disarmed the explosives, preventing catastrophic damage to the facility and saving countless lives. In the aftermath of the attack, Chancellor Mortok arrived on Coup to assess the situation. As he surveyed the damage and listened to reports of Joseph and Vesta's actions, his expression grew thoughtful. "You have once again proven your worth to the Empire," Mortok said, his voice carrying the weight of official proclamation. "I hereby grant you expanded authority to continue your work in promoting human-Klingon cooperation and overseeing the development of hybridization technology." As news of the foiled attack spread across the Klingon Empire and the Federation, Joseph and Vesta found themselves at the center of a growing movement. Support for their vision of a united future was stronger than ever. Later, as they prepared for the next phase of their galaxy-wide tour, Joseph and Vesta received reports of growing interest in hybridization programs on several Federation worlds. New opportunities and challenges lay ahead, but their shared experiences on Coup had only strengthened their drive. As their ship lifted off from Couvat's surface, Joseph turned to Vesta, their enhanced connection allowing them to communicate without words. They both knew that their journey was nowhere near the end, but they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As their ship lifted off from Couvat's surface, Joseph turned to Vesta, their enhanced connection allowing them to communicate without words. They both knew that their journey was nowhere near the end, but they were ready to face whatever came next. Their next destination materialized sooner than expected. A priority transmission from Starfleet Command lit up their communications panel, revealing Admiral Janeway's face. "Joseph, Vesta," Janeway said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Your presence is requested on Earth. We'd like you to showcase the advancements in human-Klingon hybridization to the Federation's scientific community." Joseph nodded, exchanging a glance with Vesta. "We're on our way, Admiral." The journey to Earth was swift, their enhanced ship cutting through space with impressive speed. As they approached the gleaming blue-green orb, Joseph felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was his homeworld, yet he was returning as something more than human. Earth's orbital station loomed before them, a sprawling construct of metal and light. As they docked, Joseph and Vesta were greeted by Admiral Janeway herself, flanked by a diverse group of Federation scientists. "Welcome to Earth," Janeway said, extending her hand. "We've prepared a series of demonstrations to showcase your abilities." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Joseph and Vesta found themselves at the center of a specially constructed arena, facing physical challenges designed to push the limits of their hybrid physiology. In one test, Joseph interfaced directly with a complex holographic puzzle, his mind racing through virtual pathways to solve it in record time. Vesta demonstrated her enhanced strength by lifting objects that would have strained even the mightiest Klingon warriors. The crowds were massive, with billions more watching via holographic broadcasts across Federation space. Joseph could feel the weight of their gazes, the mixture of awe and curiosity that followed their every move. Between demonstrations, they underwent extensive medical examinations at Starfleet Medical. Dr. Beverly Crusher, a woman with keen eyes and a reassuring manner, led the team of xenobiologists. Fascinating, Dr. Crusher muttered, studying a holographic display of Joseph's cellular structure. Your rate of cellular regeneration is off the charts. And the neuroplasticity, I've never seen anything like it. As the examinations continued, Joseph and Vesta found themselves in meetings with representatives from Vulcan, Andoria, and Beta Z. The discussions were intense, focused on the potential implementation of controlled hybridization experiments on their respective worlds. We propose the establishment of an interspecies hybridization research initiative, the Vulcan ambassador said, his tone measured and logical. Your insights would be invaluable. Joseph nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. We would be honored to serve as advisors. Their busy schedule was suddenly interrupted when Joseph began to experience unexpected complications. His body temperature fluctuated wildly, swinging between feverish highs and bone-chilling lows. Dr. Crusher and her team worked tirelessly, combining Federation and Klingon medical knowledge to stabilize his condition. Vesta refused to leave his side, using their shared bioelectric field to help regulate his temperature. Stay with me, Joseph, Vesta murmured, her hand clasped tightly in his. The depth of their bond was evident to all who witnessed it, garnering significant media attention and increasing public support for human-Klingon integration. As Joseph slowly recovered, an urgent communication from Chancellor Martok reached them. The Chancellor's face was grim as he relayed the news of a crisis on Borth. A group of isolationist Klingons has seized control of the dilithium mining colony, Martok growled. They threaten to destroy the ancient monasteries unless all hybridization research is halted. Joseph and Vesta exchanged a determined look. We're on our way, Chancellor, Joseph said, already moving to prepare for departure. They quickly coordinated with Starfleet to assemble a joint Federation Klingon task force. Admiral Janeway assigned the USS Enterprise E, commanded by the legendary Captain Jean-Luc Picard, to escort their ship to Borth. During the journey, Joseph and Vesta made use of the ship's holodeck, engaging in intensive combat training. Their hybrid physiology allowed them to push beyond normal limits, developing new techniques that merged human adaptability with Klingon strength. As they approached Borth, Joseph interfaced with the ship's sensors, his enhanced connection to technology, allowing him to analyze the unusual energy readings emanating from the planet's surface. There's an ancient weapon system hidden beneath one of the monasteries, Joseph reported, his voice tight with concern. It has the potential to destroy the entire planet. The Enterprise E fell into formation beside them as they entered Borth's orbit. Joseph and Vesta stood on the transporter pad, ready to beam down to the planet's surface. The fate of Borth, the Empire's most sacred world, hung in the balance. As the transporter beam engaged, Joseph felt Vesta's presence in his mind, their bond stronger than ever. Whatever challenges awaited them on the surface, they would face them together. As the transporter beam engulfed them, Joseph and Vesta shared a moment of silent communication, their enhanced connection allowing them to prepare for the challenges ahead. They materialized on Borth's surface, the ancient monastery looming before them. A team of Klingon and Federation specialists materialized alongside them, their faces set with commitment. The air crackled with tension as the sound of weapons fire echoed from the fortified structure. Joseph's enhanced senses immediately detected the complex network of energy shields surrounding the monastery. He reached out with his mind, interfacing with the shield generators. I can disable their outer defenses, he said, his voice strained with concentration. Vesta nodded, her muscles coiled and ready for action. I'll clear a path through their forces. Everyone, stay close and follow my lead. As Joseph's technopathic abilities worked to dismantle the shields, Vesta surged forward. Her hybrid physiology allowed her to move with incredible speed and agility, dodging disruptor blasts with preternatural grace. The team followed in her wake, taking advantage of the openings she created. Joseph joined the advance, his mind still partly focused on dismantling the monastery's defenses. Through their shared bioelectric field, he sensed Vesta's movements, allowing them to work in perfect synchronization. As a disruptor turret swiveled towards them, Joseph disabled it with a thought, while Vesta leapt forward to neutralize the Klingon insurgents manning it. The team breached the monastery's main entrance, the ancient stone walls bearing scorch marks from the intense firefight. Joseph's enhanced senses picked up unusual energy readings emanating from deep within the structure. His eyes widened as he realized the implications. "The weapon system is powering up," he warned, his voice tight with urgency. "We have minutes at most before it reaches full activation." Vesta turned to the specialists. "Split up. We need to evacuate any civilians trapped inside. Joseph and I will head for the weapons control center." As the team dispersed, Joseph and Vesta plunged deeper into the monastery. The ancient corridors twisted and turned, leading them into the heart of the mountain. Joseph's technopathic abilities allowed him to interface with the building's ancient systems, guiding them past traps and sealed doors. As they descended, Joseph felt a strange resonance building within him. The weapon system's energy signatures seemed to harmonize with their bioelectric field, causing unexpected surges in their hybrid abilities. Vesta gasped as she effortlessly tore through a locked door that would have challenged even the strongest Klingon warrior. They emerged into a vast chamber, its walls lined with pulsing conduits and flickering holographic displays. At its center stood a towering Klingon warrior, his scarred face contorted with rage. "Kavlor!" Vesta growled, recognizing the leader of the isolationist faction. Kavlor hefted a strange weapon, its design a fusion of ancient Klingon craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology. "You dare desecrate this sacred place with your hybrid abominations?" he roared. The weapon hummed to life, drawing power directly from the ancient system. A beam of searing energy lashed out, forcing Joseph and Vesta to dive for cover. They felt their bioelectric field fluctuate wildly as the beam passed overhead. Joseph rolled to his feet, his mind reaching out to interface with the weapon system's controls. His eyes widened as he absorbed the information flooding his consciousness. "Vesta, it's not just this planet. There's a network of these devices across Klingon space, all primed for activation." Vesta engaged Kavlor in close combat, her enhanced strength and speed allowing her to match the seasoned warrior blow for blow. "Can you shut it down?" she called out, ducking under a vicious swing of Kavlor's weapon. Joseph's fingers flew over the ancient interface, his hybrid physiology allowing him to comprehend and manipulate the complex systems. "I'm trying, but the fail-safes are incredibly complex. If I make one wrong move, it could trigger a cascade reaction across the entire network." The chamber shuddered as the weapon system's power levels continued to rise. Kavlor, seeing Joseph's efforts to disable the device, broke away from his fight with Vesta and lunged for the control panel. "No!" Kavlor roared, slamming his hand down on a specific sequence of controls. "I'd rather see Borth destroyed than allow it to fall into the hands of Federation sympathizers." Alarms blared as the weapon system began to overload. Joseph felt a searing pain in his mind as the energy buildup threatened to overwhelm his interface. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to maintain the connection. "Joseph!" Vesta cried out, seeing her mate's distress. She moved to restrain Kavlor, clearing a path for Joseph to reach the main control interface. Drawing on every ounce of his hybrid abilities, Joseph attempted a desperate maneuver. He reached out with his mind, trying to redirect the massive energy buildup away from the planet's core. The strain was immense, threatening to overwhelm his enhanced physiology. Vesta, sensing Joseph's plan through their shared bond, rushed to his side. Without hesitation, she placed her hands on the interface beside him, joining her bioelectric field with his. Together, they formed a unique neural link with the ancient weapon system. The power surged through them, their bodies glowing with an otherworldly light. The chamber around them began to collapse, stone and metal groaning under the immense energies being channeled. As Joseph and Vesta struggled to contain the overload, they heard the sounds of approaching footsteps. The Federation and Klingon specialists had returned, having successfully evacuated the civilians. They quickly assessed the situation and moved to stabilize the crumbling structure. Through their shared connection, Joseph and Vesta realized the full scope of what needed to be done. To truly neutralize the threat, they would need to disable the entire network of hidden devices across Klingon space. But the process would require one of them to maintain direct contact with the interface, risking severe trauma or death. Their eyes met, a lifetime of shared experiences and emotions passing between them in an instant. Without words, they both volunteered, each unwilling to let the other bear the full brunt of the risk. As the energy buildup reached its peak, Joseph and Vesta stood united at the ancient interface, their bodies intertwined and pulsing with power. The fate of Borth, the Klingon Empire, and the future of human-Klingon relations hung in the balance as they prepared to make their final, potentially sacrificial move. The chamber filled with a blinding light as Joseph and Vesta channeled the full might of the weapon system through their hybrid bodies. Their shared consciousness expanded, reaching out across space to touch each of the hidden devices scattered throughout the Empire. In that moment, they stood at a crossroads of history, their actions about to reshape the future of two great civilizations. Civilizations. The energy coursing through their bodies reached a fever pitch, threatening to overwhelm their hybrid physiology. With a final surge of willpower, Joseph and Vesta channeled the full might of the ancient weapon system through their intertwined forms. A blinding light engulfed the chamber, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The ground beneath their feet trembled violently as the energy dispersed, racing outward to neutralize the hidden devices across Klingon space. In that moment of cosmic synchronization, Joseph and Vesta's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of their physical forms. They felt the pulse of every device in the network, their shared minds stretching across vast distances of space. With surgical precision, they dismantled each component, unraveling the threads of destruction that threatened to tear the Empire apart. The chamber shook more violently, stone and metal groaning under the strain. Just as it seemed the entire structure would collapse around them, the weapon system's core imploded with a deafening crack. A localized temporal distortion rippled outward, catching Joseph and Vesta in its wake. They were thrown backward, their bodies still crackling with residual energy. As the dust settled and the blinding light faded, Joseph found himself sprawled on the ground, his ears ringing from the implosion. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, and felt a familiar presence stirring beside him. "Vesta," he croaked, reaching out to touch her arm. "Are you all right?" She groaned, pushing herself up on her elbows. "I think so. That was intense." The Federation and Klingon specialists rushed forward, helping them to their feet. Joseph swayed slightly, feeling disoriented but strangely invigorated. He looked down at his hands, noticing faint traces of energy still dancing across his skin. "The weapon system," he said urgently, turning to the others. "Did we succeed?" One of the Klingon scientists nodded, his face a mix of awe and respect. "The network has been completely neutralized. You did it." Relief washed over Joseph, but it was quickly replaced by a new sensation. He felt different, changed somehow. Beside him, Vesta seemed to be experiencing the same realization. "Joseph," she said, her voice low and filled with wonder. "Something's happened to us." Before he could respond, the chamber rumbled ominously. Chunks of stone began to fall from the ceiling, reminding them of the precarious state of the ancient structure. "We need to evacuate immediately," one of the Federation officers called out. "This whole place could come down at any moment." They made their way through the crumbling monastery, Joseph and Vesta moving with newfound agility and strength. As they emerged into the open air, they were met by the sight of Chancellor Martok and Admiral Janeway, who had just arrived with reinforcements. The isolationist faction, seeing their plans thwarted and their leader Kovlor defeated, threw down their weapons and surrendered to the combined Federation Klingon forces. Joseph watched as Martok personally oversaw the apprehension of Kovlor, the Chancellor's face a mix of anger and disappointment. Admiral Janeway approached Joseph and Vesta, her eyes scanning them with concern. "Are you two all right? We detected massive energy fluctuations from orbit." Joseph nodded, still trying to process the changes he felt within himself. "We're fine, Admiral, but I think we might need a thorough medical examination." "Agreed," Janeway said, tapping her comm badge. Janeway to Enterprise, 4 to beam directly to sickbay. As the transporter beam engulfed them, Joseph caught a final glimpse of Borth's surface. The ancient monastery stood as a testament to their ordeal, its weathered stones now bearing the scars of a battle that had nearly torn the Empire apart. Materializing in the Enterprise's sickbay, Joseph and Vesta were immediately met by Dr. Crusher and her Vulcan colleague, Dr. Talara. The medical team sprang into action, guiding the hybrid couple to adjacent biobeds. "I want full biometric scans," Dr. Crusher ordered, running her medical tricorder over Joseph's body. "Pay special attention to their cellular structure and neural patterns." As the examination progressed, Joseph and Vesta exchanged glances, their shared bond humming with newfound intensity. They could sense each other's thoughts and emotions with crystal clarity, their connection seeming to transcend physical boundaries. Dr. Talara raised an eyebrow as she studied the readouts on her console. "Fascinating. Their hybrid physiology appears to have undergone significant alterations." "What kind of alterations?" Vesta asked, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Dr. Crusher looked up from her scans, her expression a mix of amazement and concern. "It seems the temporal distortion has accelerated certain aspects of your evolution. Your regenerative abilities have been enhanced, and there are indications of increased neural plasticity. We're also detecting an unusual resonance in your bioelectric field," Dr. Talara added. "It appears to be allowing for a deeper connection to both human and Klingon genetic memory." Joseph sat up, flexing his fingers as he felt the energy coursing through his body. "So, what does this mean for us?" Dr. Crusher shook her head slightly. "Honestly, we're not entirely sure. You've gone beyond what we thought was possible for human-Klingon hybrids. We'll need to conduct more thorough tests to fully understand the extent of these changes." As the medical team continued their examinations, Joseph and Vesta found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. News of their success on Borth spread quickly, and soon they were fielding communications from both Federation and Klingon officials. Chancellor Martok's face appeared on a nearby view screen, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "Joseph, Vesta, your actions today have saved not only Borth, but potentially the entire Empire. The High Council has convened an emergency session to discuss the ramifications of what has transpired." Joseph nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once more. "Thank you, Chancellor. We stand ready to assist in any way we can." As Martok's image faded, replaced by that of Admiral Janeway, Joseph and Vesta shared a silent moment of understanding. Their journey had taken an unexpected turn, pushing them into uncharted territory. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond stronger and more profound than ever before. The Enterprise hummed around them as it prepared to depart Borth's orbit. Joseph and Vesta stood side by side, their bodies still tingling with newfound energy, ready to embrace the next chapter of their extraordinary lives. As the Enterprise warped away from Borth, Joseph and Vesta found themselves facing a new chapter in their extraordinary journey. In the weeks that followed, they underwent extensive medical examinations and debriefings. Their enhanced abilities fascinated both Federation and Klingon scientists, who worked tirelessly to understand the full extent of their transformation. As news of their heroic actions spread, Joseph and Vesta became symbols of unity between their two cultures. Chancellor Martok, recognizing the potential of their unique hybrid status, approached them with an unprecedented proposal. "We are launching a joint Federation-Klingon mission to explore the galactic core," he explained, his one good eye gleaming with excitement. "The High Council and Starfleet Command agree that you two would be the ideal leaders for this venture." Admiral Janeway nodded in agreement. "We've commissioned a new ship for this mission, the IKS Unity. It's a hybrid design combining the best of both our technologies." Joseph and Vesta exchanged a glance, their enhanced bond allowing them to communicate without words. They both felt the pull of this new adventure, the chance to use their abilities for the betterment of both their peoples. "We accept," Joseph said, speaking for both of them. Months of preparation followed as they familiarized themselves with the Unity systems and assembled their crew. The ship itself was a marvel, its sleek lines and powerful engines a testament to what their two civilizations could achieve together. On the day of their departure, Joseph and Vesta stood on the bridge of the Unity, their bodies humming with anticipation. As the ship broke orbit and set course for the galactic core, they felt a surge of energy coursing through them. Vesta placed her hand on the main console, and Joseph followed suit. Instantly, they felt a connection forming between their hybrid physiology and the ship's systems. Information flowed through their minds at an incredible rate, allowing them to optimize the Unity's performance beyond its original specifications. Incredible, Joseph breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. It's like the ship is an extension of ourselves. Vesta nodded, equally amazed. We're pushing it to limits the engineers never even dreamed of. As they journeyed deeper into unexplored space, Joseph and Vesta's enhanced abilities proved invaluable. They discovered several habitable planets with unique ecosystems, their hybrid senses allowing them to detect subtle environmental factors that even the most advanced sensors might have missed. 3 months into their mission, as they approached the edge of the galactic core, the Unity sensors detected an anomaly. A massive structure loomed ahead, its design unlike anything in Federation or Klingon records. It appears to be a space station of some kind, the science officer reported, but its energy signature is off the charts. Joseph and Vesta shared a look of recognition. They could feel a familiar resonance, similar to the energy that now flowed through their own bodies. "Take us in closer," Joseph ordered. As they approached, he and Vesta felt a pull towards the ancient structure. Using their combined abilities, they interfaced with the station's dormant systems. Their minds reached out, weaving through layers of alien code and long-forgotten protocols. Suddenly, the station came to life, its halls illuminating with a soft, pulsing glow. "We're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced, surprise evident in her voice. A holographic figure materialized on the bridge, a being of indeterminate species, its features a blend of familiar and alien characteristics. It spoke in a language none of the crew understood, but Joseph and Vesta found they could comprehend it perfectly. "Welcome, children of the stars," the being said, its voice resonating in their minds. "We are the progenitors, and you have awakened our sanctuary." As the hologram explained the true nature of the station, a repository of knowledge left by an ancient race of hybrids, Joseph and Vesta felt a sense of awe wash over them. They were standing at the threshold of a discovery that could reshape their understanding of life in the galaxy. The progenitor's image flickered, its expression growing urgent. "But beware," it warned. "The path to unity is fraught with danger. Even now, those who fear change approach." As if on cue, the Unity's tactical officer called out, "Multiple ships dropping out of warp. They're charging weapons." Joseph and Vesta turned to face the view screen, their bodies tensing for the battle ahead. The genetic purist faction had found them, and with them came a confrontation that would determine the future of their mission, and perhaps the entire galaxy. As alarms blared across the Unity, Joseph and Vesta exchanged a determined look. Their enhanced abilities hummed with potential, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest for understanding and unity among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.